Chapter 481. Wrapped in his arms. Raising his head, he looked up at the long horns emerging from behind. Sansa had appeared from the shadows as she always did, catching Frey's exhausted body and laying him gently on the bed, his head resting on her lap. "You look wrecked. Am I really looking at the same man who just defeated the Ultras on his own?" As she gently brushed his hair, Sansa mocked the broken state Frey was in. Right now, even the weakest Ultras could have beaten him. In response, Frey wore that same smile, the same smile he had shown the Imperial soldiers earlier. "Not bad, right?" Staring at him, Sansa couldn't pretend to be strong anymore. His face, his eyes, his expression. Even the way he spoke, the aura he gave off. He seemed more mature, stronger, different. This transformation made it difficult for her to tease him the way she used to. The longer she looked at him, the faster her heart began to race. With a slow nod, she replied softly, "Yeah, I never thought you'd still be stronger than me, even after I became a demon." Even though she had spent more time near Frey than anyone else in recent months, she never truly knew the extent of his strength. She always avoided staying with him too long, so she wouldn't interrupt his training. Even she was shocked by how far he had gone. "I told you before, I'm the monster here, not you." Frey rose to his feet. Though he was clearly exhausted after unleashing everything he had, he somehow managed to hide it with perfect control. Sansa recalled his words from the past. How he once told her he was a far greater monster than those beings called demons. After witnessing his power just now, she was finally starting to understand what he meant. But to her, he didn't look like a monster at all. After all, what kind of monster had that strange, magnetic pull around him? A pull so powerful that people followed him blindly, just like they did before. Lord Starlight had become beloved by everyone, when once he had been hated by all. That was the kind of influence Frey held now. More and more people would follow him in the future. She wouldn't be the only one standing by his side anymore. Frey was born to be a king, a leader. Both of them had emerged from darkness. But unlike her, his darkness was special. He would only grow more distant with time. Sansa already knew it, and that knowledge stirred a strange confusion deep in her heart. She was someone who had lost her way long ago, a lonely girl who had lost most of her reasons to keep living. She didn't know what to feel when the only reason she kept going began to soar far beyond her reach. Even if he denied it and refused to admit the truth, Sansa was a demon. A filthy creature that fed on life itself. A being born to bring death and misery. No one could ever be happy having her around. As these thoughts invaded her mind, Sansa considered distancing herself for a while. But she was far too perceptive. And she had already noticed Frey's condition earlier, how much strain he had put on himself after unleashing all that power. When she saw him bearing the weight alone, she found herself walking toward him without even realizing it. Just to comfort him, just to be there. And that was how she ended up in Frey's room, aware of her own conflicted state, wondering if what she was doing was the right thing at all. So much had been weighing on her lately. She had hit a dead end a while ago. Lost in her own thoughts, Sansa was snapped back to reality when Frey suddenly approached her without warning. "Seems like your mind's full." His expression was unreadable. He was so close, and Sansa was in no shape to hold her composure around him. She immediately tried to push him away. "You've pushed yourself too far lately. You need to rest." She turned her head, trying to stand and walk away. But Frey grabbed her immediately, pushing her down onto his bed. Now lying beneath him, with both her arms pinned by his grip, she couldn't do anything but stare at him in shock as he hovered over her. "I really have pushed myself. I've never gone this far before," he said, his voice low. "But I still have enough strength left to do this." Catching her off guard, Frey leaned down and stole a kiss. One Sansa couldn't escape from. It was the first time Frey had taken the initiative like this, and her face turned bright red. She tried to resist, but no strength came to her. This wasn't an ordinary kiss. It was deep. So deep she felt like Frey was about to rip her soul right out of her body. Seconds passed. The kiss continued. Sansa's strength slowly left her, until she could no longer resist at all. Fry, still locked in the kiss, felt her arms begin to loosen. Her entire body had gone limp now. That's when he knew. She had completely surrendered to him, allowing him to do whatever he wanted. Seeing her flushed face, that rare expression of shyness she hadn't shown in a long time, Fry finally pulled away after stealing her lips for so long. Sansa looked utterly dazed, which made her look oddly adorable. But Fry didn't stare for long. Instead, he gently wrapped his arms around her, leaning close to her ear. "Stay by my side, Sansa." At that moment, the demon princess's eyes widened. She realized what he was doing. He had seen her pain, seen her desire to walk away, and took the first step himself, stopping her before she could. This time it was him who held on to her, not the other way around. Sansa had never been able to resist him when she was by his side. Her affection for him had long surpassed any limit. So when he came to her like this, asking her to stay, there was only one answer she could give. She couldn't speak, but her answer was clear in the way she nodded again and again. That was her yes. Fry held her even tighter once he had what he wanted. In the end, it was him who saved her, not the other way around. Chapter 482. A Legacy of Fire and Lies. On the other side of the world, in the lands of the Empire, a massive announcement, broadcast across every corner of the nation, was made by the High Command under Aegon Valyrian. The Empire has claimed victory in its first clash against the Ultras. 10,000 Imperial warriors triumphed over 35,000 of the Demon's Hounds. Celebrations swept through the Empire. The people, long starved of hope, finally breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the first good news in what felt like an age. And behind the scenes, pulling every string, was none other than Prince Aegon Valyrian. He stood at the forefront, basking in glory, while maneuvering carefully from the shadows. As the remaining 80,000 soldiers of the Empire's army were being mobilized and equipped, a long meeting was underway behind sealed doors. Present were Ser alone, several key figures of the Empire, and of course Prince Aegon himself. It was there the prince made his next declaration. The Imperial campaign will proceed as planned. The mission must be completed. This decision came immediately after the report from the Vanguard fleet arrived. Aegon didn't hesitate for even a second, which surprised many and angered one in particular. "Did you not hear what the report said just moments ago, Prince Aegon?" Ada Starlight's voice rose sharply. "They faced an army 3 times their size. They barely survived after losing 8,000 soldiers. And you want them to keep marching forward?" Even the 2,000 survivors were in shambles, barely able to stand, let alone fight. Taking everything into account, Ada could not stay silent. She had to speak out, but Aegon remained unmoved. "Lady Starlight, I would ask you to consider this. This is also their decision." Pointing to the fact that the surviving vanguard had chosen to move forward on their own, the prince reaffirmed his stance. "You asked if I had read the report. Now let me ask you in return. Did you?" With cold logic, Aegon presented the facts. The world just witnessed the birth of a legend akin to Abraham Starlight. Your brother, Fry Starlight, decimated the enemy's forces nearly single-handedly. True, we lost 8,000, but the elite, led by Bloodmater, remain in peak condition. In other words, the Vanguard still retains enough strength to continue the mission. There's no need to waste more time, nor send reinforcements. What they have is enough. My decision is final." With unwavering authority, the prince declared once more, "They will carry out their mission to the end." In the face of Aegon Valyrian's cold, calculated logic, there was little Ada could say. The prince had results on his side. And so long as he continued to deliver, few would dare question him. That's why Ser alone remained silent. With a mere 10,000 men, Aegon had snatched the Empire's first victory in the War of Darkness. A small force that had crushed a vastly superior enemy army. and he did so while preserving the bulk of the Empire's main force for future battles. Aegon had proven his strategic brilliance and cunning. And yet, Ada could not help but wonder, was it truly wise to view this as mere strategy? After all, the Vanguard's survival had nothing to do with Aegon's tactics. It wasn't his plan that turned the tide. It was her brother, and that was the problem. No matter how much she thought about it, there was no way Aegon could have known that Frey Starlight possessed that much power to begin with. There was no way he could have anticipated that her brother would perform such a miracle. Without Frey, the Vanguard would have been slaughtered. The prince's strategy would have collapsed instantly. In truth, what was happening now could only be described as luck. Pure, blind luck. But Ada didn't believe in such a thing. Not in this world. As she stared at the prince's cunning smile, a lingering thought echoed in her mind. Just what kind of man was Prince Aegon Valyrian? And what secrets was he still hiding? Only the future would reveal the answer. As the world continued to shift with every passing second, far from the clamor of court and war, a solitary figure remained isolated, cut off from everything. The Emperor, Mikar Valyrian. He was no longer the blazing beacon of power he once was. The signs of age had begun to show clearly on his face. A faint beard covered his jaw, and the sparkle of his prime had dimmed. Now the Emperor was treated as a weapon of mass destruction. A last resort to be unleashed only when the time was right. And so, he spent his days alone, in complete seclusion, within a room no one was permitted to enter. A frozen chamber, soaked in frost and silence. At its center lay a strange sarcophagus of pure ice. Often, Mikar sat with his back against it, whispering to himself in strange, disjointed words. Sometimes they were aimless, like a man lost in thought. Other times they were utterly hollow. Meaningless ramblings spoken to no one. His mighty spear, Sunfire, rested beside him, along with the legendary Fume Knight shield. Great weapons only he had the right to wield. And yet, even with such power at his side, the Emperor sat still, alone, waiting. Staring at it, Mikar recalled a few old, beautiful memories. Ones that made him chuckle like a madman, all alone. Now that I think about it, I used them against you that day. I fought you with everything I had, and yet you defeated me so easily. That really stung back then. He sighed lightly, continuing his monologue as if speaking to an old friend. Did you ever know, old friend, that we're just fragile creatures, living our insignificant lives in some forgotten corner of the universe? We're nothing more than a tiny fragment of an endless cosmos. A cosmos crawling with monsters. Monsters so mighty they make me, the man once hailed as the strongest, seem like a meaningless fool. His voice drifting, Mikar gently tapped the surface of the icy sarcophagus with an annoyed expression. What's that? You don't believe me? That's awfully rude of you, my friend. But let me tell you something. I met one of them. His eyes dimmed with unease, the memory still vivid. He was strange, unlike anything I've ever seen. He taught me things. Bizarre things. Including the method I used to recover your body, my friend. So be grateful, be thankful, and don't you dare doubt me again. Gazing up at the frozen ceiling above him, Mikar remembered the encounter with that strange being. Without a shred of doubt, he was not human. I wonder, what kind of monsters walk among us without us even realizing it? The thought terrifies me, my friend. I don't believe we humans will ever reach that level. Ah, but you were different. You were special. The best of us. I truly believed you could reach them. But you let me down, my dear friend. Resting his forehead against the front of the sarcophagus, Mikar cast another glance at the man sleeping within. His features hadn't changed much. He had closed his eyes long ago, peacefully, without resistance. His hair had turned completely white, a side effect of the power that preserved his body. He looked like a slumbering king, departed from life after giving it everything he had. At that moment, Mikar finally rose to his feet and stepped away. You betrayed me, you left alone, and abandoned me behind. Abraham. Chapter 483. Stairs to Oblivion 1. Fry Starlight's POV. Morning had arrived, heralding the start of a new day. Another step in this long journey known as life. I felt my body stiff as I stirred awake. For once, I had gotten a good night's sleep, something rare as of late. Ever since I obtained this superhuman body that set me apart from all other beings, sleep had become unnecessary. No longer a need, but rather an escape. A realm of dreams I fled to when the weight of the world threatened to crush me. I rose quietly, sitting up on the bed as I checked my body. Running my fingers along my limbs, I could feel the power once again surging through my veins after the recent exhaustion I had endured. There wasn't a single scratch on my bare torso. My body was flawless. Thanks to my regeneration ability, which had erased every trace of injury as if they never existed. It had been 3 years since I reincarnated into this body. 3 long years of trials that forged who I had become. I could see it now so clearly. The version of myself from the past. That weak version of me. The one who once broke down in despair in his room upon realizing he'd been reincarnated into the world of his own novel. It felt as if I had climbed an uncountable number of mountains since then. I had become stronger. Far stronger. I had gained the kind of power that could shake the world and crush the enemies that walked upon it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Many mountains still awaited me ahead. Peaks far taller than any I had faced before. The trials to come would only grow harsher, and I had known this from the moment I saw Weskier's name in the final mission forced upon me by the system. To face such horrors, I needed to grow stronger. Much stronger. I had to keep moving forward. I had to become a monster powerful enough to stand atop the same stage where the titans of this world stood alone. To achieve that, I knew I would have to pay a steep price for the power I sought. Perhaps I would lose myself. Perhaps I'd lose something so precious I could never live without it again. Perhaps life would break me harder than ever before. I was bound to lose many things, but there was one thing I could never afford to lose, no matter the cost. My goal. That single goal I had set for myself. The one that gave me the will to walk through hell itself if that's what it took. The goal that gave me the strength to keep moving, to keep fighting no matter what stood in my way. In some way, I felt like I had started losing parts of myself, even the emotions that once clouded my vision in the past. Brushing aside the long white strands of hair that had grown longer recently, I stared up at the ceiling of my room. A room that trembled from time to time, proving the ship was still moving forward. In this rare moment of quiet during war, my mind drifted back to the moment I stood face to face with the half-demon Gvardiel. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd be able to control myself in front of the man who had killed someone so dear to me. The man who killed Danzo. I thought I would go berserk the moment I saw him. I had spent countless hours thinking of the perfect way to exact revenge. A way to make him suffer. To kill him in the most excruciating, merciless fashion. I wanted to unleash every ounce of strength I had gathered through my training, all of it, on him. But when the moment of truth came, those feelings vanished, as if someone had doused the raging fire in my heart with ice-cold water. No matter how long I stared at him, Gvardiel no longer felt like anything more than an enemy to be eliminated. Just like any other wretch from the Ultras, another insect, a filthy creature this world would be far better without. That way of thinking, that mindset, was what allowed me to survive the first round of war the way I did. And it brought the best possible outcome. I earned the love of every soldier in the Imperial Army, making them follow me without even realizing it. I gave them hope when darkness engulfed their hearts, showed them miracles when it felt like the world itself was ending. I told them what they needed to hear at the right time in the right place. And I did it all with full intention. I didn't do it out of love for them, nor out of pity. I did it because I needed them to follow me in the future, so I could achieve the goal I had carved for myself long ago. I manipulated them. All of them. Me. Of all people. Just as those above toyed with my fate and tried to bend it to their will, here I was, manipulating those around me in return. Actions fit for people like Prince Aegon. Those I once despised. I've changed. I truly have. But that's okay. Even if I seemed like a hypocrite, even if I turned into scum, it didn't matter. The people I truly cared for were few. So few I could count them on one hand. This was only the beginning. I have to endure until the very end. Firming my resolve once more, I broke free of my thoughts and tried to rise from the bed. But I froze mid-motion when I felt a pair of slender arms wrapped tightly around my waist. They had been there since the beginning. So much so that my body had grown used to them, and I'd completely forgotten. Beside me, Sansa slept peacefully and quietly. Despite the dark horns that grew from the crown of her head, she looked like a sleeping angel. She really was gorgeous. Slowly, I slipped away, pulling the blanket over her body to hide the curves my eyes had so often been drawn to. Unconsciously, in that moment, we looked like a married couple. A peaceful pair living a quiet life in a modest home. And strangely enough, it didn't seem like a bad thing. In fact, it felt like a beautiful ending I might actually wish for someday. But that wasn't who we were. We weren't a serene husband and wife. We were Fry Starlight, the monster, and Sansa Valerian, the demoness. Two beings destined to be the first to plunge into the flames of war. Wherever we walked, death would follow. We'd come to terms with that a long time ago, and we were ready to keep moving forward, no matter the cost together. I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then withdrew silently, leaving her behind as I left the room. I donned my black armor and prepared myself to face another day in enemy lands. "See you later," I said with a faint smile, closing the door behind me. The moment I did, I sensed her stir. Clumsily, at that, she had been awake the entire time. She hadn't moved a muscle, but I knew. I could read her like a book. She was still shaken from last night, especially after I'd taken the lead the way I had. Pretending to be asleep. How foolish. Especially when she knew I could hear her thoughts. Still, I played along. Because honestly, flustered Sansa was far more entertaining than the usual cold, domineering demoness. That was the kind of relationship I had with her. I suppose the future held countless twists and turns for us. But one thing was certain. Sansa was someone I genuinely wanted by my side. And so I chose to keep her close. Because she was one of the few people I truly cared about. Whatever the future had in store for us, we'd face it. Together. Chapter 484. Stairs to Oblivion, 2. Lord Starlight. I didn't take you for someone who sleeps in. Upon returning to the deck, I was greeted by none other than the former temple master, Bloodmater. The old man still standing exactly where he'd been since the war began. "My apologies," I replied. "I suppose the last battle finally caught up to me." He nodded. "No blame from me. Who am I to criticize the hero who saved all our asses?" With a dry chuckle, I joined him at the ship's prow, where he led what remained of the fleet. Bloodmater had changed the way he looked at me ever since the previous battle. That much was obvious. "I haven't saved anyone yet," I said. "Any one of us could lose our head at any moment. That was just one battle. The war is far from over." "True," he answered simply, and both our gazes shifted toward the horizon. It felt like he wanted to continue the pleasant conversation. There was a genuine curiosity in his eyes. But something ahead quickly stole our full attention. "We've finally arrived." For the first time in days, dry land came into view. Something other than the endless blue sea that had surrounded us day and night. That land was the enemy's, the land of the Ultras. And now I was returning to it once more. "Time for round 2, Bloodmater said. I nodded. "It's going to be a brutal one." Our numbers were small, and the enemy would be fighting on their own soil. By the numbers, our chances looked bleak. But numbers didn't matter in the face of overwhelming strength. Here and now, I was ready to flip the land on their heads. Bury them if I had to. I exchanged a meaningful glance with Bloodmater, and we both nodded. He might have been the official commander of this fleet. But we both knew who truly held command now. So, clearing my throat and charging it with aura, I let my voice ring out, an order that fell like thunder upon the troops. Attention! As if heaven itself had spoken, every Imperial soldier snapped to readiness, abandoning whatever they'd been doing. Brothers and sisters in arms, prepare for battle. We have reached the enemy's land. With both of my swords drawn, I stood at the vanguard. Follow me, and let's make the earthquake beneath their feet. There was no need for a long speech this time. Those few words were enough to make every soldier shout as one, ignited with fervor. They were ready to push themselves to the last breath, just as I wanted them to be. Now then, let's see what the enemy has prepared for us this time. The shores of the Ultras were still dozens of kilometers away, but that distance was more than enough for me to deploy my domain. With eyes glowing a fierce, violet light, I focused my aura and senses to their limit, casting them out across the cursed land. And as I sensed what waited on the other side, my face instinctively darkened. The land that first gazed upon the demonic sea, the land that had been declared as the battlefield for the second round, had ended up being unexpectedly empty. They didn't even bother to station a single soldier. The place that was supposed to be the enemy's most vital military stronghold was completely deserted. What I had just said was clearly heard by everyone nearby, and none of them had expected such a thing. Are you certain about that? Perhaps the enemy is simply hiding. Saintess Yuasha interjected, clearly doubting my judgment. Even she, who had reached SS Plus rank, lacked the means to sense enemies from such a distance. Don't underestimate my senses, Saintess. There isn't a single creature below SS Plus that can escape my domain. This body, forged through iron and fire, would never lie to me. We can't risk moving in at full force. The possibility that the witch has set a trap still stands. Taking the first step, I ignited my aura, preparing to move. I'll scout the area myself, those with the strength to follow. Do so. With a simple command, my body flared one final time before I vanished from their sight. The very next second, I was already standing on enemy ground. My teleportation always functioned as long as the target location lay within my domain, which meant appearing on the enemy's land was no challenge for me. The moment my feet touched that barren wasteland, I began scanning my surroundings. No matter how much I probed with my aura, I couldn't detect a thing. Not even a single trace of energy. They really abandoned this place. Would the Ultras truly allow us to set foot on their territory this easily? I didn't expect that. Not after seeing the way they fought us off in the Battle of Sheskler Bay. They seemed ready to unleash every ounce of their strength to keep us from invading their lands. And now you're telling me they just gave all that up? Something felt completely off. It seems the second round is going to be unexpectedly delayed. From behind me, those words rang out as shadows deepened beneath my feet, and Sansa calmly stepped out to stand by my side. She had finally arrived. Knowing their leader, Beatrice, would never do something meaningless. There's definitely a scheme of some sort, I said plainly, eyes fixed on the horizon. But there's no point in trying to figure it out now. It wasn't like I could uncover Beatrice's plan that easily. So, I had no choice but to ride the current for now. As the ships breached the shores of the Ultras continent one after another, that was the true signal. The Vanguard's mission was a success. We had reached enemy territory. Now there was only one task left. The moment they arrived, the soldiers spread out across the land while Bloodmater issued his orders immediately. Prepare the warp gate at full speed. We must ready the battlefield for the main army as quickly as possible. In response to his command, the mages immediately began preparations for the massive teleportation ritual that would soon take place. They had taken it upon themselves to construct the gate that would receive the true Imperial army. The army that would fight the real war against the Ultras. Yes, the Vanguard's mission had been successful so far, but that didn't mean the Ultras wouldn't retaliate. There was still a chance they might appear before the gate was completed. That's why we had no choice but to form a defensive perimeter around the area, to protect it from any sudden threat. But no matter how long we waited, our fears never came to pass. It seems the enemy thinks in a way completely different from ours. Staring off into the distance, Phoenix spoke in a fiery tone, remaining on alert. He was right. Our enemy was utterly unpredictable. We have no choice but to rely on our assassin friend to show us the path. I replied as we both stood at the very front of our forces. At the mention of Ghost, Phoenix couldn't help but frown. You're still convinced sending him was the right move, Fry? I nodded firmly in response. Don't underestimate Ghost. He has more hidden under his belt than anyone else. And what he's doing right now is precisely his area of expertise. I hope you're right. Yes, it happened at the end of the first battle against the Ultras. Ghost, who had been hiding within my shadow the entire time, took advantage of the chaos that erupted during the fight and infiltrated the enemy's ranks without anyone noticing. It was a bold move he proposed himself, to uncover what secrets the enemy might be hiding, and I had approved it. Ghost was now fighting his own battle, far away from us, having taken on a perilous mission that could very well lead to his death at any moment. But because it was Ghost, of all people, I believed he would pull it off. Tracking him through the third-person player perspective, I continued observing my assassin friend. All right then, show them what you're truly made of. Chapter 485. Stairs to Oblivion 3. Ghost Umbra's POV. Few have ever seen this world from the shadows. To perceive everything through darkness. Taking that ominous color as your sanctuary, turning it into your greatest weapon. That's how I've lived my life until now. Thanks to the skill I've honed since childhood, I became able to completely erase my presence. When I roam between the shadows, no one, not even someone stronger than me, can detect me. As long as I don't reveal myself, no one can sense my presence. That's what I relied on when I slipped between the shadows of the Ultra's soldiers. The other side of the world holds its own secrets. The gates that once shielded us from the wrath of the higher beings above have now swung wide open. The horrors of the past could return at any moment. No, they may have already returned. My mission now was simple. Uncover what the Ultras were hiding and reveal their true intentions at last. Hidden in the shadows, I continued to delve deeper and deeper into the heart of the entity known as the Ultras. At first, I thought they'd concentrate their forces along the shore to repel the Empire's vanguard. It looked like our chances were slim compared to their overwhelming numbers. But I was completely wrong. They didn't stop even after we landed on their lands. After observing them for a while, I realized how strange they were. Their movements, the way they carried themselves, they were so strange that I had to ask myself, are they even human like us? The deeper I infiltrated, the more I realized how little I actually knew about them. They followed a strange blood-based system. It seemed their ranks were determined by what they called the highest purity. Humans who could endure the most demonic blood were the strongest among the high-bloods, and their numbers were vast. So vast I could barely comprehend it. It's safe to say their total force surpassed 100,000 by far, easily outmatching the Empire's. But that wasn't what I came here for. There was more to uncover, so I kept going forward. And I wish I hadn't, because as soon as I snuck deeper, I stumbled upon a terrifying sight. Out there, in the barren plains, I saw massive armies filled with nightmare creatures. Savage beings who lived only to feed and destroy. Now somehow completely submissive and obedient to the Ultras. The rumors were true. They really had tamed the nightmare creatures. The mechanism that allowed them to achieve this was unknown, but I suspected the strange symbols carved into their bodies were closely related. Still, I didn't get to dwell on it for long, because what I saw next made me question everything. How could I not, when I saw them dragging a colossal being, a nightmare lord like the eight-legged lady, a massive creature being led like a tamed animal, and she wasn't the only one. Cosmos, Abyss Watcher, all of the nightmare lords were there. They had really subdued nightmare beasts that had reached the SS+ rank. This was a true catastrophe. A disaster that Fry and the others had to know about. My stealth skill kept me completely hidden. As long as I didn't get too close, no creature could detect me. But some high-tier monsters could sense my presence. So I made up my mind to retreat. What I'd seen was enough. The information I had gathered would suffice. I tried to convince myself of that. To pull back from the enemy lines. Even I had struggled to accept this suicidal mission that Fry gave me. Had I not known him personally, I would have thought he was trying to get me killed by sending me deep into enemy ranks like this. That mysterious friend of mine, he's changed so much lately. I suppose everything he's been through has finally caught up with him. Thinking of the man he had become, that warrior who performed miracles on the battlefield, he wouldn't be satisfied if I returned with something this pitiful, would he? What he truly wanted from me was something greater. A vital piece of information that could change the course of the war. He wanted me to risk my life. Fry, my brother, I feel like I have so much to say to you, but I've never been one to speak much, and I probably never managed to express what's inside. Still, you asked me to risk my life, and that's exactly what I'll do. Resolved to press on until the very end. I dove even deeper into the heart of the Ultras. From a distance, I intentionally followed the strongest among them. Especially that lord, Gavid Lindman. Being anywhere near him was like signing your death sentence. Just following him forced me to push all my senses and instincts to their limits, using my shadow technique with extreme caution. I shadowed him and his forces for hours. Hours that turned into days. Days where my concentration peaked so intensely, blood began dripping unconsciously from my eyes. Fatigue gnawed at me, but I couldn't afford to stop. Even a second of lost focus meant digging my own grave. I followed him for days. Many times I thought what I was doing was meaningless. But it wasn't. I realized that when I saw them finally reach their destination. Gavid Lindman and his forces stopped in front of a massive structure. An enormous building that seemed to serve as some kind of forbidden place. It was so tall I couldn't even glimpse the top, but I could clearly feel the overwhelming fluctuations of power radiating from above. That ominous pressure froze me in place for a long time. Just what in the world lay at the top of that staircase? Standing there in the shadows, every cell in my body screamed at me to run, to turn around and flee as fast as I could. But my legs betrayed me. No matter how hard I tried, they simply refused to move. For countless hours, I remained frozen in place, eyes locked on the summit of that monolithic structure. A war raged within my mind. Should I run? Should I press forward? What was the right choice? I stayed rooted there for an eternity, until the strange fluctuations in aura from above began to shift. Clear proof that something was about to happen. Something massive. Most likely, this was what Fry wanted me to witness. But reaching this point, continuing any further felt like suicide. And yet, I couldn't turn back. Step by step, I crawled through the shadows, climbing those stairs. One threshold after another, slowly drawing closer to the truth. Whatever awaited me up there, it was ominous. The pressure from the aura surged to insane levels with every step I took. To be honest, I wanted to flee. I wanted to retreat, but I couldn't. Not really. It was like something else was driving me forward. Like someone else had seized control of my body from afar. I was forced to continue, and so I did. And then, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the top. Fry, what kind of curse have you placed on me? How the hell did you even get me to come this far? I wondered. But whatever spell this was, it ends here. No force in the world could compel me to take one more step now. Because what stood before me was beyond comprehension. At the center of a massive platform, a colossal gate stood, its surface radiating an ominous crimson glow. Around it, kneeling in reverence, were dozens of creatures. Filthy creatures, twisted with horns and monstrous features. Demons, all of them waiting for something terrible. And they didn't have to wait long. The gate blazed to life, its light blinding, while the pressure crushed me where I stood. I don't know what expression I wore, but I knew for sure it wasn't a pleasant one. The fear gripping me in that moment was unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. From within the gate, a wretched demon emerged, his body hovering effortlessly above the ground, his red eyes scanning the kneeling hordes with complete indifference. For twisted horns spiraled from his skull, and though his frame looked frail, only a fool would believe it. The pressure he unleashed was beyond anything I had ever encountered. But even then, he wasn't the truly terrifying one. No, it was something else. My gaze stayed locked on the still glowing gate, even as the first demon arrived, because I felt it. He was coming, the one who made my heart sink deep into my chest. The one who nearly made me scream as my very soul threatened to flee my body. That aura, that pressure, it was greater than anything I'd ever known, more lethal than any beast I'd ever faced. That thing. That was death itself. Colossal body, two dark, monstrous horns, violet glowing eyes, and hundreds of grotesque protrusions sprouting from his flesh. Strange black lines carved through his face. He looked terrifying, majestic, like a walking embodiment of filth, of death, formed in the darkest corner of this vast universe. The second demon stepped through the gate, a bored look on his face. So this is the world our Lord has chosen? He glanced around with obvious disappointment, only to be answered by the first demon with a soft, restrained laugh. The Lord's motives have always been a mystery, but the results are always spectacular. This time won't be any different. I know that much already. I'm the one doing all his dirty work. With an annoyed wave of his hand, the demon released a devastating surge of energy, erasing every other demon present in an instant. How many times must I tell you, Geppetto? Armies are meaningless when I am around. He growled, as the other demon, Geppetto, chuckled softly. Sorry. I sometimes forget you inherited the king's reincarnation soul. The two exchanged a few more words I heard clearly, and with every syllable my condition worsened, because I realized their identities from what they said. The 13th ranked high demon, Geppetto, and the other, the one who made my breath vanish, the 10th ranked, one of the strongest demons to ever exist, Zebar. Knowing who they were only made it all worse. What stood before me wasn't just one, but two demons with enough power to end this war in an instant, with catastrophe for the human side. And the only thing I felt beyond fear was despair, especially when I saw Geppetto glance in my direction with that deranged grin of his. So, what should we do about our little eavesdropper over there? There was no doubt now. They had known about me all along. With a strange pulse of pressure, Geppetto erased all of my shadows in an instant, exposing me. Humph. That insect? He's so weak I didn't even register his presence. Zebar stepped forward, and with it, a colossal wave of pressure crashed down. Felt like he'd just dropped the entire sky onto my head. He advanced slowly, his massive shadow swallowing everything in its path. Seeing his partner move unprompted, Geppetto sighed in mild annoyance. Don't forget, Zebar. We're not allowed to participate in this war. Not yet. Their master's orders were absolute. But Zebar clearly didn't care. So what if one little insect dies? So that's what I am to them. An insect. A crawling bug before a whale. A monstrous beast capable of shaking the entire world. Watching him tower over me, watching my breath vanish. I realized then and there, I'm going to die. Zebar raised his hand, and I stood frozen, waiting for the end. But the end never came. What happened next shattered all expectations. Zebar's hand was stopped, blocked by a black sword I knew all too well. Zebar's horrifying eyes narrowed with interest at the intruder who had appeared from nowhere. The moment he arrived, he unleashed his aura to the limit, miraculously pushing back Zebar's overwhelming pressure. Well, would you look at that? Geppetto laughed. His aura. It's almost like ours. Zebar simply stared at him with growing curiosity. And as their auras clashed in silence, the first collision occurred. Between Zebar and the man who had come from the void. Fry. Chapter 486. A game set in Shadows 1. When nightmares become reality. A tangible reality. That seemed like the perfect description of what unfolded in the high blood province of the Ultras. There, in Sheskler, the grand edifice, the wondrous gate built with difficulty by the Ultras, witnessed the first clash. A clash between humans and those who stood above. The entities Fry had always tried to escape from. Now, one of them stood before him. The first was Geppetto, a vile demon who looked like a 14-year-old boy. If you ignored his devilish features, who would have guessed he was the 13th ranked archdemon? But Geppetto wasn't the worst one. No, that title belonged to the monster standing directly in front of Fry now. A filthy, cursed demon. One who held the 10th highest rank. Zebar, the man known as the one-man army, and the bearer of Agarotha's reincarnation soul. This being had nearly devoured Ghost, until Fry arrived at the last possible second, pulling his friend away from the demon's jaws. Zebar made no effort to conceal his power. His SSS rank aura continued shaking the entire place. Fry could barely stand. He was facing an opponent who completely outclassed him, and the only reason he hadn't crumbled was because he had pushed his explosive aura to its maximum limit. But even after going beyond his limits, his strength felt lukewarm compared to the monstrous presence in front of him. The Lord Starlight, who had gained both restraint and overwhelming power, was now struggling. His expression had darkened. Even he couldn't hide his true emotions before such a being. Ghost. No matter what happens, don't move, don't breathe, don't even think about doing anything. Shielding his friend behind him, Frey's body flared with a blinding violet light. His eyes never left Zebar. Not for a second. Any delay could mean catastrophe. Then, something ominous crept into the air. A sinister force slithered like serpents across the ground, wrapping around Fry and Ghost's necks like quiet nooses. The two froze in place, as if some kind of curse had bound them. Ghost didn't understand what was happening, but Fry knew. He understood clearly. Whatever these things were, they came from the demon before him. And just when everything was about to explode, a cheerful voice interrupted the tension from behind. Now, Zebar, you know you're not allowed to do that. Especially not in front of that boy. Geppetto floated calmly in the air, drifting closer with a cold smile. That's Fry Starlight, the one Beatrice told us about. Stopping his comrade, Geppetto took control of the situation. There's no need for all this hostility, Fry Starlight. We're not here to participate in your pathetic little war. Please relax. There's nothing to fear. He said this with the same playful tone he'd been using since he arrived. Fry responded with a half-smile, one that couldn't hide his unease. Not here to participate in the war? That's hard to believe. Why wouldn't you believe it? You know full well we possess enough power to wipe you and everyone with you off the map. There's no point in deceiving you. For a moment, Geppetto's words sounded almost reasonable. If the demons could send monsters like them, then this entire war was meaningless. But Fry saw things differently. Forgive me, but I don't believe you. I know you both have the strength to end this war in an instant. And that's exactly why I can't trust you. Geppetto tilted his head, intrigued. Go on. Fry gave them both a quick glance before declaring. Zebar, bearer of the reincarnation soul, a demon who can create countless clones of himself. Each one nearly as strong as the original. That's why he's called the one-man army. Geppetto, you, on the other hand, are a cursed demon who commands a filthy ability. You can manipulate the dead and force them to fight for you. Both of you are specialists in large-scale warfare, the top war generals among all high-ranking demons. And you want me to believe that creatures born for war will simply refuse to join one? Fry laid his cards on the table. His words rang with truth, and he had just revealed undeniable facts. He was right, and that's why the reaction he got was explosive. Even Geppetto abandoned his playful tone for the first time and revealed his other face. I see. So that's what Beatrice meant. The strange human Beatrice spoke of. This was him, Fry Starlight, a bizarre human, full of surprises. You know quite a lot already. I wonder, where did you get all that knowledge from? Geppetto couldn't figure out how Fry knew so much, especially about their abilities and their roles in the demon army. Earth was supposed to be completely isolated. There was no way a human should have known any of this. And yet, somehow he did. Will you tell me? Or maybe you won't. Raising his hand toward Fry, Geppetto's body flared with a deadly gray light that made the void itself tremble. I wonder, if I cracked your skull open, would I find the answer? If I killed you and turned you into one of my puppets, would you whisper your secret to me? He he he. Geppetto laughed softly, as the pressure surged. The nightmare had only just begun. Whether it was Zebar or Geppetto, both were monsters of the legendary tier, a rank that had long been lost to time. The SSS tier. Although Frey's aura was on the same level, it barely covered a small space in front of them, giving him and Ghost, who stood behind him, a sliver of a chance to remain standing. One could say Ghost took the worst of it. He hadn't breathed since the strange confrontation with the high-ranking demons began. But unlike him, Fry held himself together far better. Facing Geppetto, he raised his middle finger toward him, a terrifying grin stretching across his face. If you want answers, then go ask your damned king for one. He chuckled mockingly, scoffing. I'm sure both Agaroth and Westgear already know. What's the matter? Didn't they tell you? Haha, I guess you're not that important after all, rank 13 demon. How pitiful. Standing behind him, Ghost stared at Fry in horror. He couldn't speak, but his face said everything. What he wanted to say in that moment was simply, Fry, have you lost your mind? Had he finally snapped? Where did he even get the nerve to say something like that to those creatures? Was he brave? Or just stupid? Or both? Ghost couldn't understand him. But one thing was certain. Fry had achieved exactly what he intended. He'd pissed them off. Chapter 487. A game set in shadows. 2. It happened in less than a breath. In a single breath, Zebar appeared right before them, reaching out toward Frey's face. The demon moved with terrifying speed. A speed that few in the world could even perceive. But Fry did, at the very last moment. Before Zebar's hand reached him, Fry unleashed a vertical slash at the speed of light, a devastating strike forged from every part of him. Every cell in his body, every muscle, every drop of his aura. While provoking them, he'd already been preparing for it. His strongest attack. The peak of his limits. Everything he had in a single blow. 10,000 steps of shadow. Fry Starlight style. Nameless judgment. That was Frey's pinnacle. A strike that released a massive beam of violet aura that threatened to swallow the world whole. The pressure was insane. And this time, the blow carried even more power than the one he had unleashed back in Shiskler Bay. Ghost was certain of that. He had witnessed it himself, after all. Frey's strike erased the gate entirely, along with both Zebar and Geppetto, swallowing them within its vast reach. And it kept going, continuing forward until it devoured the sky itself. All the ultras nearby saw it clearly, and could do nothing but stare in dread. It held enough power to kill any one of them. But, even against a force like that, the great demon Zebar didn't even flinch. He stood exactly where he was, as everything around him was obliterated. Geppetto, too, had formed some sort of strange shield around himself to survive. But unlike him, Zebar took it head-on. With his body. Fry didn't seem surprised, and Ghost could only stare in shock from behind. True, Zebar hadn't moved an inch, but a deep, vertical cut had clearly appeared on the right side of his chest. A long wound, leaking black blood that dripped onto the earth beneath him. With his filthy fingers, Zebar touched the wound. He showed no particular reaction, simply stared at the blood, then looked back at Fry. Not bad. That was all Zebar said. His honest opinion of the strike he had just endured. Frey's peak. His ultimate attack. All of it summarized in two cold, dry words. Not bad, huh? Fry laughed, then sighed in annoyance. He'd kind of expected this, but it still pissed him off. So that was the worth of all his struggle? Just those bland words, and a few drops of blood. You managed to wound me, Fry Starlight, Zebar said. So let me reward you with something worthy of your efforts. Unlike Geppetto, Zebar was impossible to read. He was one of the 10 high demons, and those 10 were unlike all the rest. You were half right in your earlier guess. Yes, we're here for the war, just as you said. But we won't be joining it now. We won't interfere in any way. In other words, the day you see us on the battlefield will come. But not yet. Between humanity and their first true clash with the ones seated in the top 10. Only time stood in between. But how much time? Days? Weeks? Months? Years? It was impossible to say. But one thing was certain. The time they had been granted wasn't long. That's the reason we won't kill you both right now, Zebar said. And the reason I came here as a clone. Not in my true body. Hearing those last words, for the first time, Frey's eyes widened. Then he calmed. So that's how it is, he muttered, realizing that the one he had just wounded wasn't even the real body. At that moment, Fry began to grasp the true scale of the monsters he had aimed to one day defeat. He was finally starting to measure the distance between him and that unreachable ceiling, and what a vast distance it was. I look forward to our next meeting, on the battlefield. As his body lit up with a blinding purple light, Fry wrapped both himself and Ghost in his aura, activating his teleportation ability. From the beginning, he had been preparing an escape route for himself and his friend. But transporting two people at once required time. Which was exactly why Fry had baited his opponents earlier, buying enough time to complete the process. But in the end, his efforts were meaningless. Zebar had never intended to kill him in the first place. Instead, he had cleverly tested Frey's limits without ever truly harming him. Even someone like Zebar wouldn't dare disobey the orders. This was the only way. Their eyes met. A gaze sharp enough to pierce through steel. And then, Fry and Ghost vanished from the platform, leaving the high-ranking demons behind. Whether it was Fry or Zebar, both of them were looking forward to it. That inevitable battle in the near future. Good grief. Can't the two of you ever show up without destroying my precious gateway every single time? While Zebar and Geppetto remained fixated on the spot where Fry and Ghost had disappeared, a third demon made her entrance behind them. Wearing her elegant black dress and a witch's hat, she finally arrived. Zebar barely acknowledged her, but Geppetto's eyes lit up the moment he saw her. He darted toward her at lightning speed, joy radiating from his face. Beatrice! I missed you so much. B2. Judging by his reaction, Beatrice had clearly anticipated this and opened her arms wide, welcoming Geppetto with a warm embrace. Zebar could only sigh as he watched the scene unfold. Geppetto, despite his true nature, now looked like a teenager no older than 14, while Beatrice appeared as a graceful and dignified lady. Their embrace resembled that of a mother holding her child, or an older sister comforting her beloved little brother. You're still as troublesome as ever, Geppetto. No way, Beato. Zebar was the rude one this time. He wouldn't even talk to me, even though he's only 3 ranks above me. Isn't that just disrespectful? Geppetto kept whining, while Beatrice calmly ran her fingers through his gray hair. Yes, that's certainly rude. With a faint smile, Beatrice raised her head to meet Zebar's gaze. He returned the look with a nod. It's good to see you well, Lord Zebar. My apologies about the gateway. We weren't the ones who blew it up, anyway. The magical portal, one that enabled travel across vast distances between planets, wasn't easy to create. It had required a witch of Beatrice's caliber in the first place. But Fry had obliterated it with his previous attack. Now that Beatrice had joined them, there were 3 high-ranking demons of Weskir's Black faction gathered in one place. and the dynamic between them was strange. Even though Geppetto was far more powerful than Beatrice, he clung to her like a child. As for Zebar, he treated the woman before him with sincere respect. It was clear that Beatrice's status was deeply rooted within the ranks of the demons. Not just due to her power, but because of many other factors as well. "What do you think of him, Lord Zebar?" she asked. Zebar took a few seconds before answering. "He's different from the rest of the humans. That much is clear. But I have yet to see anything that truly makes him worthy of Weskir's attention." Fry had knowledge he shouldn't possess. His power was immense by human standards, but still far too little in Zebar's eyes. He didn't yet see what made this young man special, but he had piqued his interest enough. "I'll find the answer when we face each other once again," Zebar said, as he touched the wound Fry had left on his body. And just like that, the wound vanished entirely without a trace. Beatrice nodded lightly. "I hope you continue to stay dormant until the right time comes, Lord Zebar. I may not know our Lord's true intentions, but I'm sure you understand them better than I do." She wasn't wrong, and Zebar didn't seem to object. "Though we're both part of the 10 great demons, I've never once understood what Weskir is thinking. Even though I'm older, he climbed the ranks faster than anyone in history. Except for Crimson, the Red Moon, Weskir had been the fastest demon to ever rise through the ranks. That alone made him worthy of being the King's Eye. Forgive my rudeness, Lord Zebar, but do you have any idea where he is now?" Weskir had never once shown himself. Not even to Beatrice, who had set up the entire witch's game for him. He only ever contacted her through his shadow. For someone on Beatrice's level, locating him was simply impossible. But she still held on to a faint hope, because Zebar might be strong enough to even stand against Weskir. Zebar, however, shook his head. "Even my real body would struggle to track Weskir down, let alone a weak clone like this." "I see." Beatrice looked somewhat disappointed, though she didn't let it show. Weskir hadn't bothered to appear, even with beings like Zebar present. Whatever the rank 4 demon was planning, he was pouring all of his time and energy into it. So much so that he no longer cared about his own faction. "He'll come to us when the time is right, so there's no need to rush things, Beatrice." As he walked past her, leaving her to comfort Geppetto, Zebar left the area. The witch nodded, fully trusting his words. "In that case, let's keep playing the game. Just a little longer, shall we?" Chapter 488. Echoes Before the Storm 1. Fry Starlight's POV. The wheel had finally begun to turn, and there wasn't much time left. Using my teleportation ability, I managed to escape the enemy's land alongside Ghost without incident. The moment we got far enough from that death zone, I was finally able to exhale, relieved after that unexpected clash against opponents who vastly outclassed us. Ghost, in particular, had endured the worst of it. As soon as we reached safe ground, he collapsed to the ground, panting heavily and unable to compose himself. He was drenched in sweat, his hands trembling uncontrollably. It was the first time I'd ever seen Ghost in such a state. The shadows of what he had just experienced had hit him violently. That's what it meant to stand before 2 of the strongest demons in existence. Unlike me, he didn't have an SSS rank or a reserve that could keep him standing in front of beings like that. I spent a few long seconds watching him silently, then turned my gaze toward the Empire's military camp, a few hundred meters away. I had deliberately teleported a distance away to avoid drawing attention with a sudden appearance. But now, as I observed them more closely, the human forces, I couldn't help but ask myself, how are they supposed to survive, exactly? Clutching my head and pulling my hair back, a pounding headache took hold the moment I thought about the sheer scale of the catastrophe we were about to face. Geppetto, also known as Thanatos, some named him the King of Death, and Zebar, the 10th seat, a demon capable of ending wars on his own, for he was an army by himself. How exactly were we supposed to deal with beings like that at our current level of power? I've met Sir Elan before. I know the power Mikar holds, Compared to them, I might very well be the strongest human alive on this planet. And yet, even at full power, all I could do was leave a shallow wound on one of them. What exactly are we hoping to accomplish? Not to mention, Zebar didn't even come in his real body. I don't know the exact limits of the clones created through Agaro's reincarnation soul, but from what I do know, each clone caps out at about 80% of the original's power. And the more clones, the weaker each one becomes. In other words, at best, I was facing only 80% of the real 10th demon's power, and even then, all I managed with my strongest technique was a mere scratch. Damn it! For the first time in a long while, that feeling came back. That suffocating sense of powerlessness. As if my strength meant nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just how much more cursed power do I need if I'm to stand against monsters like that? What must I do? What must I sacrifice? Should I let go of my humanity? My very soul? Should I sell myself to one demon in order to kill another? I don't know. Against beings like Zebar, I truly don't know what I'm supposed to do. The gap in strength was overwhelming. Fry! After a few minutes, Ghost finally managed to compose himself. Seemed he, too, shared my sense of dread. Do we even stand a chance of winning? No, surviving? He asked, and it was unlike him. But it was the right question. Let's see. Holding my swords, Dark Sister and Balerion, I gave them a long look before answering. Our chances are 0. For now. Ghost immediately caught the key part. For now. I nodded, then gently tapped his shoulder. Our enemies are tougher than ever before, Ghost. If they join the war now, we're going to die. Without question. To defeat an SSS rank warrior, you need another of the same level. Even with all my cheats, only my aura had reached that rank. The rest of my stats are far below. Meaning I can't defeat a true SSS rank warrior. Let alone the 10th demon who had already reached the higher stages within that rank. Because SSS isn't a single tier. It's divided into 7 stages. The problem is, I don't know which level Zebar and Geppetto stand at. Their full strength is still a mystery to me. But they won't participate in the war just yet. Something is forcing them to hold back, which means they're here for another reason. A reason that compels someone like the 10th seat himself to descend upon Earth. So the real question becomes, why are beings like them here in the first place? I'm certain there are countless battlefields across this vast world that require their presence. Far more than this one. Humans pose no real threat to them, unlike certain other species. Maybe that's why Zebar came only as a clone, not in his true body. But that doesn't change the fact that he still came. With Geppetto no less. A reason that makes this war we're fighting against the Ultras look like a trivial matter in their eyes. Think. Why would they come here? What task could beings of their level be entrusted with? Deep in thought, I tried to unravel their mystery. Geppetto and Zebar. They're part of the Black Faction. The group that follows Weskier. In other words, they're acting under that damned demon's orders. Weskier. The 4th-ranked demon who had lurked in my shadow for so long. The one responsible for my father's death. The vile entity stalking us from the corners of existence. The true embodiment of what it means to be a demon. Weskier. Just thinking about him made a sudden realization strike me. A realization so sharp I immediately pulled up my system interface. If my assumption is correct, it should appear now. Ignoring all the other system functions and my chaotic stats, my eyes locked straight onto the mission tab. Main quests. Kill 10,000 Ultras. 5,000 achievement points. Completed. Defeat one of the Ultras' main powerhouses. 5,000 achievement points. Completed. Final mission unlocked. Eliminate Weskier's shadows. Mission description. Weskier's shadows are spreading across the world, and the hunt has already begun. This is a race against time. Who will hunt who first? The catastrophe is inevitable. Your blade may be the deciding factor in the war to come. Before it's too late, eliminate Weskier's shadows. The first shadow, the eternal witch, Beatrice. The second shadow, the Death King, Thanatos. also known as Geppetto. The third shadow, the one-man army, the 10th-ranked high demon Zebar. The fourth shadow? Reward for completion. Unlock advanced phases of shadow adaptation. One phase will be unlocked per defeated shadow. Penalty for failure. Humanity's extinction and total defeat in the war. System note. I know. You're probably wondering who I am, aren't you? Who is this snarky system that keeps mocking you all the time? Let me tease you a little. If you manage to complete the mission, I'll tell you who I really am. Exciting, isn't it? But let's be honest. This mission is harder than anything you've ever faced, and your chances? Paper thin. Will you hunt them, or will they hunt you? Personally, I'm betting on the latter. But hey, who knows? Maybe you'll surprise me. I'd love to call you a frog at the bottom of a well, but let's admit it. Your strength has grown a lot lately. Let's just say you're barely decent now, but not nearly good enough. Do your best, Fry Starlight. Chapter 489. Echoes Before the Storm, 2. Reading those vile words from the system again and again, I felt a dry, involuntary laugh escape my throat. That damned system. My assumption was right. More or less, I was beginning to understand why those cursed demons had come. The real game has begun. We humans, and even the Ultras, were just pieces on a giant chessboard. And now the real players, the ones moving the pieces from behind the curtain, were finally stepping onto the board themselves. Hunt them, or be hunted. That's likely the reason for their arrival now, orders straight from Weskier himself. They're here to take down the big fish. In other words, those standing behind the humans on this board. Maybe they're targeting the engineer, or the other mysterious humans who were with him. In short, while we fight our war against the Ultras on the front lines, there's another war about to erupt. One that will take place in the shadows, between beings powerful enough to tear apart the sky and crush mountains. Understanding this terrifying truth, part of me was gripped with dread about the future ahead, while another part lingered on the final words of the system. If I manage to complete the mission, it'll reveal its true identity to me. Then there are Weskier's shadows. 4 in total, but the fourth is still unknown. With each one I slay, I'll unlock a new phase of shadow adaptation. Beatrice is the easiest. Zebar, or the fourth shadow, will be the hardest. Whoever that fourth one is, it doesn't change the fact that this is the toughest mission I've ever received. There's no explicit time limit, but judging from how things are moving, it's safe to say I have until the end of the war. They want me to reach the peak of the high 10 demons. In this short a window, clenching my fist so tightly my fingers nearly dug into my palm, I turned back to Ghost. The countdown has begun, Ghost. This time, we might actually all die. I chuckled quietly, as my eyes blazed with a radiant violet light. But even if we do, make sure of one thing. I'll take down as many sons of bitches as I possibly can. The mission the system just issued didn't really change anything. The goal had always been the same since the very beginning. I still needed power, much more of it, and I would pursue that power. The overwhelming might capable of tipping the balance. As I renewed my resolve, I walked alongside Ghost toward the Imperial encampment. Ghost, for now, keep the appearance of the high-ranked demons a secret. Don't report it. I spoke seriously, causing Ghost to hesitate, uncertain if that was truly the right decision. Hiding something like this could bring disaster on all our heads later. There's no point in informing the Empire's commanders. It would completely shatter troop morale. Many might surrender on the spot just to preserve their lives. I needed the Imperial soldiers to fight longer. I couldn't let them give up so easily. Ghost gave me a firm nod. I understand your reasoning. To be honest, I never planned to inform the general public. Only a few in command. But if keeping this between us is what you want, Fry, then so be it. Thank you. I thanked my assassin friend before casting a brief glance toward the shadows behind me. You too, Sansa. The moment I said her name, Ghost's eyes widened in surprise at the sudden emergence of our shadowy demon ally. He hadn't sensed her presence at all. Sansa didn't look pleased. Fry, don't tell me you're thinking something reckless like handling this on your own. She frowned as she spoke. I felt their presence the instant their feet touched the ground, and they sensed mine in turn. They're not like Beatrice. They're unlike any enemy we've faced so far. Fry, if you fight either of them now, you will die. She had already sensed the power of our new foes, which explained why she rushed to me immediately after our skirmish with them. I figured I'd alarmed her by vanishing earlier when I charged off to save Ghost. Sansa had always been able to read my intentions. She spent so long watching me from the shadows, always close, even before I was aware of her. And that was how she knew that I had intended to fight them. She reached out to me instinctively, and I could do nothing but take her hand in mine. Don't worry, I don't plan to fight them alone. This isn't my war to fight alone. We'll face it together, I reassured her. And Ghost, who stood beside her. The three of us returned to the camp, our hands still linked, as none of us wanted to let go. Feeling her warm touch, sensing her true emotions toward me, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Sorry, Sansa, but I lied. With my expression darkening, I looked ahead as the gears of my mind began forging the path forward. In this world, nothing mattered but power. Overwhelming power and nothing else. The only thing that would never betray me, the only thing I could rely on, was myself and my own strength, nothing else. I was already prepared to move forward, to kill every last one of my enemies. The days passed, one after another, since Fry returned with Ghost, both having realized that foes greater than ever before awaited them. The Imperial camp, its numbers reduced to barely 2,000, had tightened into a defensive formation along the shores of the demonic sea. For the past few days, the mages had worked tirelessly night and day in a desperate push to complete the massive teleportation array, the array that would serve as the gateway for the Empire's real forces. At this point, the vanguard was vulnerable to an ambush at any moment. If the Ultras somehow breached them and destroyed the array, all the mages' efforts would be lost, and they'd be forced to start over from scratch. To prevent such a catastrophe, the vanguard's strongest warriors took turns standing guard around the clock, 24 hours a day. Fry Starlight, in particular, spent each entire day seated at the frontmost ridge of the camp, gazing into the distant horizon. With his full aura unleashed, there wasn't a chance that any enemy could slip past him unnoticed. It could be said that much of the Empire's current confidence stemmed from his mere presence nearby. Whatever showed itself, Fry would obliterate it on the spot. That was what the Imperial soldiers believed, and it was a belief growing stronger by the day, alongside Frey's rising status. He had brought back the era of miracles, sparing them countless tragedies. Ghost Umbra, on the other hand, had reported the truth about the Ultra's use of nightmare creatures, along with the overwhelming armies he had seen firsthand. His intelligence gave the Empire a true strategic advantage. What he uncovered was immediately passed on to the High Command, who had already begun working on their countermeasures. And as the mages neared the completion of the teleportation gate, the Empire's forces waited for the Ultras to strike, waited for round 2 to officially begin. Clustered behind Fry Starlight and the Vanguard unit, many soldiers were once again prepared to put their lives on the line and follow Lord Starlight, just as they had in the previous battle. Many of them longed to return to that state, when they thought of nothing but killing the enemy before them, driven forward by an invisible force. It had been the first time they ever felt truly significant, as if they'd achieved something worth remembering for the rest of their lives, something that would etch their names into the pages of history. They all wanted to fight again, but no matter how many hours or days passed, the enemy they so desperately waited for never showed. So much so that the teleportation gate was completed without them even realizing. It seems that our enemy this time isn't Gavid Lindman, but Beatrice. With those weighty words, Fry stepped down from the front line and returned to the camp. Unlike Gavid Lindman, the military commander who led from the front, Beatrice, the demoness, preferred manipulating her enemies from the shadows. The complete absence of enemy forces, and the fact that they were allowed to summon their reinforcements without interference, was most likely her idea. Gavid Linman would have never allowed something like that to happen. All the Imperial side could do now was wonder what kind of game the Eternal Witch had prepared this time. Chapter 490, Echoes Before the Storm 3. As the clock's hands ticked slowly, but steadily forward, Imperial forces began pouring through the colossal magic formation that had taken days and sleepless nights for the mages to complete. Though the formation was massive, allowing many to pass at once, bringing through the full army still took a tremendous amount of time. In the end, once the Empire obtained a clear overview of the enemy's forces, including the nightmare creatures and high-blood warriors, they sent 70,000 troops, an overwhelming army comprised of the Empire's greatest elites and warriors. Great families' leaders, guild masters, and renowned champions were all present. Such a massive army quickly spread across the eastern shore of the continent, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The only ones left behind were 30,000 soldiers deliberately held back by Aegon, reserved for his special plan later on. Meanwhile, none of the SS Plus rank powerhouses, such as Sir Alone and Mikar Valyrian, had made a move yet. They remained behind, waiting for the enemy to reveal their full might. The moment they entered the war, it would mark the beginning of the final battle. To fully transport all 70,000 soldiers took 3 full days and nights. The vanguard camp, which had barely held 2,000 men previously, had now expanded dramatically, covering a massive stretch of the Shizklar region. The Empire had finally secured a foothold in the enemy's lands for the first time in ages, and now it was only a matter of time before the second clash between both sides erupted. The atmosphere of war was always unique, especially the nights that came just before a battle. During nights like these, humans would often try to forget, even for a moment, the pressure and dread that threatened to crush their shoulders. You'd see them passing the time with friendly sparring matches scattered across the camp, or simply spending quiet moments with those they held dear, perhaps sharing what might be their final moments. On the other hand, some simply couldn't push the echoes of war from their minds, especially those who had already experienced its brutal depths. Some would isolate themselves completely, striving to keep their minds sharp for the perfect start to battle. And then there were those with far different ambitions. That small group that ventured out in search of one man was a perfect example. Inside one of the tents, set apart from the rest, the man everyone had been talking about, Fry Starlight, spent his final days in near-total seclusion. Not by choice, but because most didn't dare to approach him. He would occasionally step out to meet with important figures and military leaders, discussing the strategy and preparations for the coming assault. It was said that Fry had chosen, of his own volition, to remain at the front lines, intent on facing the enemy and bearing the weight of the war alone. In truth, most of the Empire's forces, and even its citizens, had heard whispers of what Fry had accomplished in the last battle. Though many dismissed it as exaggeration or outright fiction, it didn't change the fact that Fry had become an existence that could no longer be ignored. And so, approaching him became a problem. If the rumors were true, and he really was that extraordinary, then how could ordinary soldiers even interact with such a miracle? But if the rumors were lies, then he was still Fry, the criminal many still hated, the one who was supposed to be executed. Caught between awe and resentment, most chose to simply stay away from him entirely. But for one particular group, that was no longer the case. A group that chose to stay close to him, more than anything else. Fry felt their presence, so he stepped out of his tent naturally, almost as if he had anticipated their arrival. Outside the entrance, he found dozens. No, hundreds of soldiers gathered around his tent, their eyes fixed on him. Most of them weren't in good shape. Some of their wounds were still bleeding through the tightly wrapped bandages. Fry recognized them immediately. "You're still here, huh?" Walking toward them, Fry stopped right in front of the girl named Celine, who stood at the front of the group. They were the same ones who had fought alongside him before. The vanguard troops who survived because of him. We deeply apologize for disturbing your rest, Lord Starlight. Selene bowed low in apology, followed quickly by the others behind her. But Fry made them all stand tall again with a silent surge of aura that forced their bodies upright. There's no need to apologize. It pleases me to see the faces of those I once trusted to guard my back, he said with a smile. Honestly, I thought you had all already left. The soldiers' expressions eased slightly, prompting Selene to take the first step and make her request. Forgive me, Lord Starlight, but may we fight by your side again in your next battle? No, in every battle that follows. She stuttered near the end, making her request sound foolish, and immediately regretted taking responsibility for voicing it. But the other soldiers quickly backed her up, voicing their true desires. Let us fight beside you again, Lord Starlight. We want to stay with you, Lord Starlight. They repeated the same words again and again. Frey's expression darkened, and then, with a terrifying pressure, he released his aura. The suffocating force silenced them all as fear overtook their faces. Coldly, Lord Starlight spoke, subduing them with nothing but his presence. Do you even realize what you're about to commit to, soldiers of the Empire? He stepped forward, eyes scanning each of their faces, one by one. I told you before, I may not know your names, but I witnessed your struggle, your perseverance. You were given a single mission, and you completed it flawlessly. The Vanguard's mission had been the hardest. Many died, and those who survived were given the rare privilege of withdrawing from the front lines. A chance most soldiers never got. Many took that chance, but some foolishly rejected it. And those fools were the ones standing before Fry now. Has your confidence blinded you just because you won once? Has surviving death dulled your sense of reality? Do you think you're special just because you lived while others died? Do you think it will always be like that? Pressing them further, Fry declared, Are you afraid of my aura? Does my power scare you? Let me tell you. Battlefields are full of people like me. Some may even be stronger. I made my decision long ago, to fight this entire war, to kill and tear down as many of our enemies as possible. And for that, I'm prepared to stake my life. Are you? Will you follow me to your death just because I told you to? Will you throw away your lives just to chase that fleeting feeling of glory? Wake up. This is war, and here all that awaits you is death. Fry took one last step forward and unleashed his killing intent without restraint upon the soldiers. Within seconds, most of them had turned and fled. One after another, those men who swore to fight by his side until death ran, their false resolve shattered. Their empty dreams collapsed under the weight of the grim reality Fry forced upon them. His killing intent was thick, heavy, and horrifying. Something he had forged through the slaughter of countless humans and monsters alike. In less than a minute, they were gone. Fry watched their backs as they disappeared, but he couldn't ignore the few who remained, still standing, upright despite the crushing aura that weighed on them. Only 8 people. 5 men, 3 women. 3 looked young. 2 were his age. 2 more were middle-aged. And 1 was an old woman, appearing to be in her 60s. It was a bizarre lineup. One of them even wet herself from sheer terror. But she didn't move. That was Selene. Her legs trembled. Her blue hair hid her eyes. But she forced herself to remain where she was. That made Fry smile. And he withdrew his aura. I meant every word I said, he admitted. But I acknowledge the will of those who remain. Fighting by my side means living each day with nothing but a threadbare veil between you and death. And today, you've proven that you're capable of facing death itself. Glancing at them once more, Fry concluded, I'm sure each of you has your own reason for following me. Whatever those reasons may be, you've all earned my respect. With his back turned, Fry walked away. We move out tomorrow. Be ready by then. And the moment he said that, all 8 of them shouted in unison without thinking. Yes, sir. In that moment, Fry gained the first members of his personal unit. The unit that would follow him for a long time. A unit that lived only for him, and for the goals he had set long ago. Chapter 491. The Witch and the Wounded Star 1. The atmosphere of war was truly one of a kind. It resembled an ordeal. One that only a select group of humans experienced each time. Some unfortunate souls were dragged into it more than once, while others had enough luck to escape unscathed every time. The War of Shadows was still in its infancy. Many had yet to grasp the scale of darkness it would cast. At least, not yet. From the Empire's side, the main forces had finally arrived, planting their feet on enemy soil, Ultra's continent. A force of 70,000 warriors. An army composed of the finest and fiercest. An army like that spread across vast land, its spirit blazing high, fueled by people desperate to bring glory to their homeland. But many of them were nothing more than naive amateurs, lured by dreams and ambitions that made them believe war was a simple affair. It was only a matter of time before they crashed headfirst into bitter reality. Sooner or later, amid the Empire's encampments, seated atop a tree stump with a small campfire flickering in front of him, Fry often caught glimpses of such soldiers. People who would likely die without anyone ever knowing they existed. But he didn't care much. There were very few souls he genuinely wished to see survive. This was one of the rare moments Fry spent alone since returning to camp. Most of the time, he remained close to the upper command, discussing his role in the war. Especially now that he occupied the vanguard position. It wasn't uncommon to find Ghost, Snow, or even Phoenix around him. And when he returned to his tent, which served as his personal quarters, he usually spent time with Sansa, who rarely left due to her demonic form. All of that made his solitude feel both rare and cherished. Fry had always lived alone, dependent on no one, immersed in isolation. And in such moments, he often drifted deep into thought, reviewing himself again and again, trying to reach the ideal version of who he should be. Seated there by the modest campfire, Lord Starlight looked like a seasoned warrior who had lost his way in endless battles. No one dared approach him. Many eyes were fixed on him, but only a few had the courage to take the first step. Yet that didn't apply to the old woman who approached from behind. Her steps light and almost inaudible. But of course, Fry noticed her. There was no way she could slip past his senses. "Forgive the intrusion, Lord Starlight. Tell me, would you mind if an old lady joined you?" Staring at her and listening to her request, Fry naturally recognized her. An elderly woman who looked to be in her 70s. Her face bore the marks of time. Deep wrinkles, but her platinum blonde hair tied in a ponytail, and her unique military outfit made her stand out. Fry guessed her black uniform dated back to a very old era, signaling that she'd been on the battlefield for quite some time. The brutal scar cutting across the right side of her face was proof enough. With a soft smile, Fry made room for her and said, "Unfortunately, I can't bring myself to say no to you." Hearing his words, the old woman chuckled and sat down beside him. "Are you perhaps shy because of the age gap between us? How polite of you, Lord Starlight." "Fry is enough," he cut in calmly. She nodded. "Then call me by my name too. It's Zenith." Fry nodded in agreement. The woman before him was one of the 8. Those who remained with him until the very end. One of the few who chose to face death by his side. "So, Zenith, tell me, what brings you here to share my fire?" Fry asked, seizing the opportunity to learn more about her. He had already decided to study those 8 more deeply, to understand the pieces he held in his hands. Her coming to him alone had saved him the trouble. Zenith sat silently for a moment, gazing into the fire, before she pulled out a fine cigar from her military coat. "To be honest, I came to see what kind of person you are." Upon hearing her answer, Fry smiled faintly. He had already guessed it. "I assume your head is already full of ideas." Zenith didn't deny it. "Of course, you're unlike anyone else. Not even your father, Abraham Starlight." As soon as she uttered that name, Fry found himself interrupting. "Did you know my father?" "That's right," she replied. "Impressive," Fry said sincerely, giving her his honest praise. A faint glow lit up his eyes. He had already guessed the level of power this old woman possessed. Her aura was at least SS-. Her strength was not something to take lightly, and Zenith hadn't bothered to hide it from the start. At times, you feel like a radiant star sent to revive an age of miracles. At others, you seem like a wounded beast thirsting to spill as much blood as possible on the battlefield. Sometimes, I even sense a strange hunger for death within you, a hunger that makes you want to kill others. And eventually, yourself. Hearing Zenith's strange assessment, Fry let out a dry laugh. "You've got the strangest ideas about me, Zenith, but some of what you said is true." Fry offered a vague reply, leaving her to wonder which part she had gotten right. But Zenith didn't seem bothered. With a light snap of her fingers, a small spark of blue electricity danced in her hand, softly illuminating her worn face. "My name is Zenith. Just Zenith. I have no title, no one to claim me, Lord Fry. I'm a woman who's already lost everything. Everyone dear to me is dead, and all I have left is emptiness. They all died, while I somehow survived through all these long years. To be honest, I no longer know why I even keep fighting." Gently extinguishing the spark, Zenith turned her gaze back to Fry. "Lord Fry, I'm sure you're wondering why I've chosen to fight this war at your side so willingly. Let me be clear. I don't have a reason. I have nothing left to lose. And that's what makes me useful to you. An SS class which, with no ambition, no desires, just an empty vessel looking for a fitting end." With a cold smile, she stared at Fry. For some reason, his gaze had locked onto the gruesome scar carved across her face. "And for that reason, I feel like I might find what I'm looking for by following you into this war. Lord Fry, Zenith, a witch who left nothing behind but corpses. A soldier who had spent most of her life drifting from one battlefield to another, appearing when war broke out, disappearing quietly once it ended. You could sometimes find her wandering through the alleys of the capital, or through the larger cities, sometimes even the smallest villages, drifting without purpose. She rejected people. She had already lost too many. In Frey's eyes, she looked like a woman carrying the weight of all those dead souls, continuing to live in their place. Maybe all she really wanted was to die. To die in a way that would make those who'd gone before her proud of the way she ended. That was why she chose to follow him. Because death always followed Lord Starlight wherever he went. Understanding all of this, Fry, in some way, saw himself in the old woman sitting beside him. She was just like him, burdened by the weight of lives that were lost for their sake. She had lost her right to die a long time ago. Now all that remained was a worn-out body searching for the right place to fall. Chapter 492. The Witch and the Wounded Star 2. Zenith was not weak. In fact, she had been a fierce presence during the first battle in the Demon Sea. Fry would most definitely benefit from having her at his side. He knew she wouldn't hesitate to throw away her life for the right cause. That didn't seem right. Taking advantage of a broken woman like her. But Fry didn't see it that way. Then let's give death a story worth writing in its records. Zenith. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't try to convince her to keep living. That wasn't his role. The only thing he could offer was a path to fight fiercely. Until the day life left her and she finally attained the death she longed for. At the very least, her tale would be one worth remembering. If she followed him, that much was certain. Zenith accepted his words with silent satisfaction. He had given her exactly what she wanted to hear. I look forward to fighting by your side, Lord Fry. Then we're looking forward to the same thing. After reaching their unspoken agreement, the two of them laughed quietly, sharing a moment of conversation. The entire exchange seemed unnatural, considering the vast difference in age between them. And yet they understood one another perfectly. More than either expected. Without even realizing it, Zenith found herself talking far more than usual, sharing stories from her long life. Fry listened patiently and intently, learning more and more about the witch who had decided to serve under his command. Zenith would no doubt become his personal spellcaster, his weapon against those who stood in his way. That was why he gave her such attention, deepening his understanding of her. It raised his affection score in her system significantly. Then, just as Zenith was about to launch into another story from her distant past, they were interrupted. A group of knights approached without warning, cutting through the silence of the camp. It wasn't hard to guess who they were here for. Every one of them had their eyes locked squarely on Fry, and he, Lord Starlight, understood it instantly. "Gentlemen, what do I owe the pleasure of your visit for? To bring such threatening auras with you?" Fry asked with a calm voice, as the knight at the front stepped forward to speak. He looked like a seasoned warrior, framed by a broad figure and a chiseled physique that radiated strength. "Fry Starlight, we've heard many strange rumors about you. Rumors of miracles, unbelievable miracles. Forgive our insolence, but we wish to see those miracles for ourselves. That is why I, on behalf of my men, challenge you to a friendly duel." Studying them with a single sharp glance, Fry quickly assessed their power. They were 6 warriors in total, most of them likely duelists or spearmen. Their leader was the strongest among them. He seemed to have only recently broken into S rank. That probably explained his overconfidence. The reason he dared to request a duel. The old woman, Zenith, was about to rise from her seat and burn them alive, but Fry stopped her at the last second, his smile widening. "Very well, let's do it. Come at me. All of you, at once." A strange silence fell over the camp. The 6 knights exchanged glances, struggling to believe what they had just heard. 1 against 6? It had to be either pure arrogance or terrifying confidence. But a single look into Fry Starlight's eyes was enough to silence any doubt. He wasn't joking. "Come on. I'd like to finish this before my fire grows cold." He rose from the tree stump slowly, like a man waking from a nap. Not someone about to face 6 of the Empire's finest warriors. His steps were calm, deliberate. With each pace forward, the pressure around him thickened, an invisible weight choking the air. It felt like an unseen blade was slicing through the space around him. One of the knights instinctively took a step back, but their leader raised a hand and gave the order. "Full assault. Don't give him a chance to control the field." At his command, the 6 surged forward at once, their bodies flickering with speed, their auras flaring like compressed flames. A spear, a sword, dual blades, a heavy axe, a coiling whip, each weapon launched with one shared goal: to shatter the myth of Fry Starlight before it could begin. But what happened next flipped that notion on its head. In the blink of an eye, Fry vanished from sight. A burst of compressed air echoed through the field, and the first knight found himself hurled into the sky before even realizing he'd been struck. 1. Frey's voice was calm as he appeared behind the second opponent. A sharp roundhouse kick crushed the man's ribs, sending him crashing into the axe-wielder, both of them falling in a tangled heap of steel and limbs. 3. Time itself seemed to slow. Fry moved through their attacks like he was reading a script, his eyes tracking every shift, every intent, countering them a heartbeat before they even happened. He stopped the twin sword wielder's strike with a palm thrust, releasing a compressed aura burst that knocked the man back as if a tempest had erupted point-blank in his chest. 4. Only 2 remained, the whip wielder and the commander. The first hesitated, while the other lunged in with a sweeping strike of his whip, its dark brown aura twisting like a venomous serpent aiming for Frey's neck. But it found nothing. "Behind you!" Frey's voice came from directly behind. The man turned, only to catch a glimpse of Frey's face before collapsing, unconscious, to the ground. 5. Now only the commander remained. He hadn't moved once from the beginning. His grip tightened on the shaft of his spear, his eyes narrowing, and the aura around his body began to thicken with intensity. "I knew you weren't just a rumor." He spoke softly, then planted the spear into the ground and activated his combat stance. His aura turned crimson, and with each breath, his body radiated waves of searing heat. Flame sky style. First phase. Fry didn't flinch, even when the commander split the ground open with a molten slash. Fry simply twisted his torso slightly, letting the attack pass within inches without touching him. And then, in a flash no one could track, he appeared right in front of him. 6. One word. Then Frey's fist sank into the commander's stomach with incomprehensible force, driving the air from his lungs and lifting his body at an awkward angle. The man crashed down, barely conscious, gasping to stay awake. Fry didn't pursue. He stood still, calmly adjusted his coat, and began walking back to his seat beside Zenith, who had been watching the entire fight with a subtle gleam of amusement in her eyes. "Apologies for the delay. Where were we?" He sat back down, as the broken bodies of 6 elite knights lay scattered around him. Chapter 493. This is not the boy you once knew. 1. Apologies for the delay. Now, where were we? Fry said that to Zenith as he calmly sat down beside her, having just taken down 6 of the Empire's finest warriors in mere seconds, barehanded. Zenith was impressed by the display, but not surprised. She had already seen what Fry was capable of. His effortless victory was expected. What the old witch didn't anticipate, however, was what happened next. Just as Fry turned back to resume his conversation, they found themselves suddenly surrounded. Dozens of knights, both men and women, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, their threatening auras unmistakably brimming with eagerness for battle. "What's the meaning of this?" Fry asked, glancing over the large crowd that had gathered around him. One after another, the requests came flooding in. "Lord Starlight, allow me the honor of dueling you." "Me too." "Wait, I asked first." "Get in line." "Fight me, Fry Starlight." Challenge after challenge rained down, so many that Fry couldn't even make sense of what was happening. Zenith, seated beside him, couldn't help but burst into laughter at the absurdity of the situation. "Seems like everyone was curious about you, Lord Fry, and the moment they saw that fight, they all pounced at once. Ever since the strange rumors had begun spreading about him, his feats, his alleged miracles, even comparisons to Abraham Starlight, countless eyes had been locked onto Fry, yet none had dared take the first step. But the moment those 6 earlier challengers broke the barrier, the rest wasted no time in seizing the chance to test the man whose blade was said to be godlike. Realizing this, Fry sighed in frustration. "I'm supposed to be the one watching you fight so I can evaluate your strength, Zenith, not the other way around." Hearing that, Zenith slowly leaned away and pulled out another luxurious cigar, lighting it with amusement in her eyes. "Unfortunately, you'll have to wait for my debut until the next real battle. For now, they're all yours, Lord Fry." Seeing her deliberately distance herself to avoid being dragged in, Fry stood up again with an annoyed huff. "What a dependable subordinate you are." Turning back toward the soldiers who had come for him, Fry briefly considered his options. Should he just release a wave of killing intent alongside his aura and scare them all off in one blast? He was confident it would work, but he quickly abandoned the idea. He had other plans for the Empire's soldiers, and if he pushed too hard now, it might backfire later. So, with a resigned sigh, he stepped forward and stood calmly in the center of the crowd. "Gentlemen, you came seeking a duel, and that is what you shall receive. Come at me one by one. Don't hold back. Fight me with the intent to kill, not to spar," he declared as he assumed a relaxed stance, full of gaps and openings, without even summoning the blades he was famous for. It left many in the crowd wondering if he was even taking them seriously. Clearly, he wasn't, and that offended quite a few. The first to step forward was a towering soldier with a massive greatsword resting on his shoulder. He had long black hair, a muscular frame, and a giant scar running across his chest and neck. He looked like a true battle-hardened warrior. Fry Starlight, I know there's no smoke without fire in this world. If the rumors say you're strong, then you must have something to back it up. He wasn't the champion of the Victoriad for nothing. Many had already witnessed his feats. Gripping his greatsword, the seasoned warrior stepped forward. My name is Davos of House Sunlight. Allow me to test the strength that makes you stand so casually in front of me. With that bold declaration, Davos lunged forward at a shocking speed. Surprising some, considering his massive build. Swinging his sword in a powerful vertical arc, he aimed straight for Frey's head, intending to cleave him in two. The strike was incredibly fast, and out of nowhere, his blade ignited with flames, turning the attack into a blazing catastrophe meant to erase Fry from existence. But Fry barely needed any effort to see it coming. At the very last second, he shifted his body to the right by mere centimeters, letting the flaming greatsword crash into the ground where he had just stood. Seeing his blade miss its mark, Davos gathered his strength to attack again, only to find he couldn't move his weapon. Trying to pull the sword free, he realized Fry was stepping on it, just 1 foot. Casually pressing down on the blade, Davos pulled with all his might, veins bulging across his muscled arms. But no matter how hard he tried, the sword didn't budge. He had lost a contest of raw strength to a lean young man who wasn't even trying, merely resting his weight lazily on one leg. What stung Davos most wasn't just the power. It was that Fry hadn't even taken him seriously. Davos of House Sunlight, you place too much trust in your physical strength. And that puts you in a terrible spot when your opponent is stronger than you, Fry said as he moved for the first time since the duel began. And with that motion, Davos suddenly saw the world flip upside down. He was slammed into the earth with a single blow. Find your true weapon, Davos. This world is full of monsters far beyond what brute strength alone can overcome. Fry ended the match with those words, as Davos remained sprawled motionless on the ground. He hadn't even seen the last strike coming. It wasn't a duel. It was a one-sided demonstration of power. With his arm raised over his face, hiding it from view, Davos slowly stood up and dragged his greatsword away. Thank you for the match, Lord Starlight. He said it quietly, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear in the silence that followed the earlier display. Fry, on the other hand, simply nodded indifferently and announced, "Next." Sure enough, a second challenger stepped forward. A swift assassin specialized in speed and precision strikes. But Fry brought him down easily with a single blow once again. Your stealth technique is useless once I've already sensed your presence. Hiding your aura isn't enough. Stealth extends to your breathing, your heartbeat, and every sound your body makes. Fry ended the second duel with another piece of advice, then raised his voice again. Next! And so it continued. Duel after duel, challenger after challenger. Dozens upon dozens of soldiers stepped forward to face the young prodigy who had stirred their curiosity. Fry faced every kind of warrior, but not a single one lasted more than 10 seconds against him. He was terrifying. A true martial artist of the highest caliber. It seemed like no matter what kind of opponent or situation he was placed in, Fry adapted flawlessly. Unbeknownst to them, his shadow adaptation ability was at work. And one by one, the soldiers began to see him in a completely different light. Slowly, cheers began to erupt across the training grounds. The area was no longer filled with dozens, but hundreds of soldiers, all watching in awe. Bit by bit, the atmosphere shifted. They no longer challenged Fry to shatter his legend, or to test his strength out of skepticism. They fought him simply because they wanted the honor of standing before a great warrior. To see how far they could push themselves. Fry ended every duel with advice. And strangely, those small insights always seemed to be the missing piece in the challenger's combat styles. The 19-year-old looked less like a peer, and more like an ancient master who had lived for centuries, versed in every combat style under the sun. It didn't make sense. But Fry was called a miracle for a reason. and miracles were never meant to make sense. His knowledge came from more than just experience. It came from countless life-or-death battles, and from the insight he'd inherited through the nameless mask. Lord Starlight had far exceeded their expectations, and that's why the crowd kept growing. More and more filled the grounds, eager to watch, eager to learn. Hours passed, one after another. So much time went by that Zenith had already left, leaving Fry to face the endless stream of challengers alone. But contrary to what one might expect, laughter began to fill the air. The soldiers were enjoying themselves, cheering every time Fry brought down another opponent with effortless grace. And before he even realized it, Fry had just defeated challenger number 1000. Chapter 494. This is not the boy you once knew. 2. The clock now read 4 a.m. It had been 4 hours since the first friendly duel began, and for the first time, Fry felt a faint burn in the muscles of his arms. Just a touch of strain. It seems I'm starting to grow weary, he sighed, turning toward the crowd that still surrounded him. Despite all the time that had passed, the number of spectators hadn't decreased in the slightest, which made sense. There were over 70,000 soldiers stationed at the camp. But Fry saw no point in continuing this any further. That's enough for today, everyone. The next one will be the last, he announced with finality. The crowd instantly erupted into protest. Huh? Why? Wait, my turn's still far off. I've been waiting forever. Please, Lord Starlight, we need your insight. One after another they pleaded, and Fry frowned reflexively. Are these really the Empire's strongest soldiers? Because it feels like I'm surrounded by a bunch of kids. He didn't understand it. But what Fry didn't realize was that he had already earned their admiration. He hadn't seen himself fight. He didn't know how mesmerizing his combat style looked to others. Thanks to shadow adaptation, Fry had become immune to most combat styles in the world, especially now that he had nearly mastered the first phase of the ability. He might still struggle against truly complex techniques, but the soldiers before him were far too basic. Dealing with them had been effortless. Despite their insistence, Fry had already made up his mind. One last duel. One more match, then this was over. Because if he gave in to their demands now, he'd be here until sunrise. Faced with his firm stance, the soldiers could only accept it. One duel remained, and the lucky challenger was just about to step into the ring. But at the last moment, someone unexpected stepped forward, his voice ringing out loud and clear. Would you allow me the honor, Lord Starlight? It was a voice most had never heard before. But to Fry, felt familiar. The surrounding soldiers turned in frustration, wondering who this arrogant newcomer was that dared to cut in. And then they saw him. His presence alone, along with the escorts that flanked him, caused the air around them to grow colder. A stunning young man stood there, with long sky-blue hair, a light beard that hinted at maturity, and a body that radiated crushing pressure. He had arrived. Many recognized him instantly. He was one of the commanders selected to lead the Empire's massive army. All eyes were now fixed on him, and on the entourage that followed. He hadn't come alone. Dozens of beautiful women accompanied him. Fry showed little reaction, but it was clear from the look in his eyes. He wasn't pleased to see this man. Frost Moonlight, the current lord of House Moonlight, accompanied by several sons and daughters of his bloodline. Beside him walked Ceres Moonlight as well. It seemed the church had restored her severed arm. Unlike Frost, who had refused such intervention and continued to live with one arm since the tragedy that struck House Moonlight 2 years ago, Ceres looked far more stunning than she once had. Maturity now graced her features. It's been a while, Fry. I see you're still as radiant as ever. She initiated the conversation herself. Something highly uncharacteristic of her. Fry responded with a calm smile. I'm nothing compared to you. Your beauty alone has stolen the spotlight from me. He motioned toward the soldiers whose jaws had collectively dropped at the sight of her. He realized he was no longer the star of the show. The soldiers instantly caught on that he was referring to them, and many of them straightened up awkwardly, prompting a round of unexpected laughter from both Frost and Ceres. House Moonlight, once known for its icy detachment, suddenly seemed warmer. That surprised Fry more than anything. Turning his attention back to Frost, who had been staring at him since the beginning, Fry finally gave his answer. I don't mind dueling you, Lord Frost, but the decision isn't mine to make. It belongs to the soldier whose turn you're trying to steal. Fry gestured toward a middle-aged man standing in line, a commoner with no known background, a man who had been waiting patiently for his long-awaited chance to face him. If Frost wanted to fight Fry, he would have to ask that man for permission. Fry had no intention of yielding. Even to the lord of a great noble house, it might have seemed disrespectful, but Fry didn't care much for titles or noble lineage. Surprisingly, his words didn't provoke any offense from Lord Frost Moonlight. Instead, the man nodded with a faint smile and walked straight up to the waiting soldier. Then, without hesitation, he bowed his head. Forgive me, brave warrior. Would you allow me to take this duel in your place? Do me this favor, and I will never forget your kindness. Frost's words, his tone, his humility in addressing a mere foot soldier, left the crowd stunned. Even Frey's expression shifted slightly. The arrogant lord of noble blood, Frost Moonlight, bowing to a nameless commoner? Fry never imagined he'd witness such a thing in his lifetime. The only ones who didn't look surprised were Frost's family members. They had known for a long time that something inside him had changed. With her eyes closed, Ceres nodded softly, a satisfied smile on her face at her cousin's gesture. As for the soldier, he could only nod repeatedly in flustered agreement, still overwhelmed by the situation. Thank you. Frost expressed his gratitude before turning back to face Fry. Will this do, Fry Starlight? He asked, meeting his eyes. Fry nodded and gestured for him to step forward. Then let's begin, Lord Frost Moonlight. Frost returned the gesture with solemn weight, then took his first step into the arena. You won't be able to beat him. Those were the words Ceres spoke as he passed by her. Frost didn't deny it. He simply kept walking, with a soft smile. I know. He knew very well. The Fry standing before him now was nothing like the reckless boy he had once faced 2 years ago. Back then, Fry had been immature, powerless, insignificant. But now, when he looked into those black eyes, deep and hollow like an abyss, Frost realized he was facing a monster, a beast powerful enough to shake the world. Come to me, Spear of Ice Riem Shard. Summoning his radiant weapon, Frost's body erupted with a terrifying aura of frozen power, so cold that the air around them began to freeze over. The current Lord of House Moonlight had become far stronger than before. Fry could sense it clearly. His opponent's strength had reached the peak of S+ class. He had climbed 2 full ranks since their last encounter. Facing an opponent unleashing his full might, Fry raised his hand as well. Come to me, Demon Slayer, Dark Sister. Gripping the black katana in his right hand, Fry responded to Frost's freezing aura with one of his own, then pointed the blade toward him. Let's begin. Chapter 495. The Distance Between Us. Let's begin, Fry said bluntly, summoning the Demon Slayer, Dark Sister, and assuming his usual relaxed stance, one riddled with openings. Yet, despite Fry declaring the start of the duel, Frost didn't move. He stood there, still as ice, almost as if he were waiting for something. Aren't you going to use your other sword? If I'm not mistaken, you fight with 2. Frost asked calmly, noting the absence of the sword Fry had used against him in the past. Ah, you mean Balerion. Fry scratched his hair with his free hand, then leaned lazily on his blade. Apologies, Frost. It's not that I'm underestimating you, truly. I just don't see a need to use it against you. He paused for a second, as the 2 locked eyes, cold mist beginning to spread between them. Dark Sister will be enough. As those words left his lips, the air around them grew tenser. The soldiers surrounding the field stared in silence, sensing a strange, suffocating pressure taking hold of the arena. Frost showed no emotion. He simply nodded. Understood. That's what he said. But the sharp glint in his eyes told a completely different story. No matter how much Fry denied it, he had clearly just looked down on him, fighting with one sword instead of two. It was like saying he could defeat Frost using only half of his strength. And his casual, lazy stance? It looked like he wasn't even taking the fight seriously at all. His posture was full of weak points, as if he were begging Frost to strike. But the Lord of House Moonlight wasn't a fool. He knew better. He knew it was a trap. Appearances could be deceiving. What I want to know is, how big is the gap between us? That was what Frost was thinking. He had survived by sheer luck when he was once imprisoned inside the prison cube alongside Mikar Valerian. That experience had stolen more than 2 years of his life. Before that, he had devoted himself to training, especially since the incident involving his father. Since that day, Frost had worked relentlessly to grow stronger, day and night without rest. That drive had allowed him to leap 2 entire ranks in a relatively short time. He truly was talented. But the one standing before him now wasn't merely talented. He was a monster, a prodigy beyond comprehension, a miracle that appears only once in a century. Frost wanted to measure that distance. The distance between himself and the man called Fry Starlight. And so, without warning, Frost launched forward, shattering the ground beneath his feet as he surged ahead faster than the speed of sound. The sheer force of his movement created a sonic boom that exploded through the air. And in less than a second, he was in front of Fry. Wielding his great spear, Riem Shard, he thrust with blinding speed, aiming straight for Frey's face. But Fry bent backward at the last moment. Dodging the strike by a hair's breadth, Frost immediately vanished from sight. Reappearing behind him, this time he didn't stop at a single attack. He unleashed a torrent of spear strikes, so fast, it looked like he was wielding dozens of spears instead of just one. On the other side, Fry dodged everything with terrifying precision, his body glowing with a deep, violet aura. "All you're doing is running from my spear," Frost said coldly as he channeled his aura into the weapon, causing the air around it to freeze over. "Fight me seriously." He thrust again, but this time, the spear unleashed a monstrous blast of frost, a massive attack that threatened to engulf Fry entirely. Fry stared at the incoming wave, then at the soldiers standing behind him. They had gathered around the arena to spectate, which meant that if he dodged, they would be caught in the blast. "I can evade this, but if I do, they'll get hit." With a bitter smile, Fry realized what was happening. "So you did it on purpose, huh?" Fully aware of Frost's intent, Frey's blade ignited with a surge of shadowy aura. Then, without warning, his hand moved like a living creature, with intelligence of its own, slashing dozens, no hundreds of times in less than a second. He intercepted the icy blast with ease, shattering it into harmless shards of frost. But just as he neutralized the attack, Frost appeared right in front of him again, using the previous explosion as cover. His spear, now massively enlarged by his freezing aura, looked less like a weapon and more like a missile made of ice. Fry raised Dark Sister and blocked. Metal struck metal. The resulting clash created a high-pitched shockwave so intense it made the surrounding soldiers clutch their ears in pain. Frost didn't relent. He continued attacking without pause, while Fry remained on the defensive, parrying each strike effortlessly. Both of them became streaks of light, dashing across the arena. Their battle was so fast and brutal that the sparks from every weapon clash erupted like wildfire across the field. Frost was giving it everything he had. It was safe to say he was fighting at full power. As for Fry, he remained on the defensive, calmly deflecting the relentless onslaught of spear strikes. For a few brief seconds, Frey's face showed something rare: surprise. Inside those abyss-like black eyes of his, everything was moving in slow motion. What the soldiers couldn't see, what they couldn't even feel, Fry saw clearly. His enhanced senses could pick up on the subtlest details. They had been sharpened long ago to exceed all natural limits. Still watching Frost's spear, Fry continued to block his attacks. Heavy. That was Frey's thought as he took on the full force behind the current Lord of House Moonlight strikes. Frost's spear was heavy, powerful. The young lord had nearly perfected his spear style. There were no wasted movements. His control was impeccable. Though Fry had parried every strike, he could feel the weight behind them with perfect clarity. While Frost panted, fatigue beginning to creep in, Fry kept watching him a little longer, then stepped back lightly. He glanced down at his sword, then toward the opponent standing across from him on the battlefield, and finally spoke. "Frost Moonlight, I'll admit this much. There was a time in your life where you gave more effort than anyone else. I can't begin to imagine how many hours you poured into refining your spear. The level Frost had achieved was one many warriors would willingly give their lives to attain. And Frost had reached it in barely 2 years. His talent was undeniable." Frey's sincere words made Frost's eyes widen for a moment, before he gripped his spear tighter and scowled. "Are you praising me now, Lord Starlight? Or insulting me? I honestly can't tell," he asked through gritted teeth. Fry answered instantly. "The first one. I truly admire the distance you've traveled, and the level you've reached." Fry was being genuine. But Frost didn't like what he heard. "I don't want praise from you, Fry Starlight. Especially not from you. You're the very monster who makes all this effort I've put in, all this progress I've made, feel meaningless." Who was he lying to, really? After everything he had done. All the training, the sacrifices, the progress, he still hadn't touched Fry once. While Frost gasped for air, Fry hadn't shown the slightest change since the duel began. He had blocked everything, making all of Frost's efforts seem like a child's attempt to scratch a wall of steel. And now here he was, praising him. Praising what exactly? "This is the level I've reached after doing nothing but train since the last time we fought. The one they called a prodigy." Frost's voice grew bitter. "But compared to you, I'm starting to wonder if I even deserve that title." He had trained in the best environment possible, received the finest resources the Empire had to offer, and been mentored by the greatest warriors from every corner of the land. He was the Lord of House Moonlight, blessed with status, privilege, and opportunity. He had spared no effort. And yet the man before him had already surpassed him, by a terrifying margin. If Frost was talented, then what was Fry Starlight? While Frost mocked himself, Frey's expression darkened. And for the first time since the duel began, Fry took his first step toward his opponent. Up until now, he had only defended. "You've misunderstood, Frost Moonlight." The moment Fry moved, a sinister pressure exploded from him. The full weight of his SSS rank aura. An overwhelming force crushed down on the entire battlefield. Soldiers all around collapsed to their knees, unable to withstand it. Even Frost could barely stay standing, his face frozen in horror as he stared at Fry. Fry Starlight looked like a completely different person. "This power you see before you is not something I attained through training alone." Chapter 496. A Glimpse of the Abyss. A man could dedicate his entire life to training if he wished. But there are realms of strength that no amount of training could ever reach. If training were enough, everyone would become a legend in their time. This strength is the result of everything I've endured. Every life and death battle I've faced, every collision I've survived, every ounce of pain, and all the suffering I've borne. The life Fry Starlight had lived was anything but easy. The fate he had been forced to carry, the tragedies he had been thrown into, all of it had shaped the Fry who stood here now. Those abyss-black eyes of his had seen too much. Far too much. He had only lived for 3 years in this body with full awareness. But in those 3 years, He had experienced more than most would in a lifetime. This is not a level you reach through training alone, Frost Moonlight. Fry declared, pressing forward. His aura alone forcing Frost backward. Frost couldn't bear it anymore. He launched himself at Fry, losing control. Desperate to fight, to prove something. But Fry was behind him before he even realized it. And in the next instant, dozens of deep, surgical cuts appeared across Frost's arm. The one holding his spear. Wounds that could have been fatal. If Fry hadn't deliberately held back, he had cut just enough to make Frost drop his weapon, unable to hold it any longer. The sound of the great spear clattering to the ground echoed across the arena. Moments later, its wielder collapsed as well, falling to his knees before Fry. Fry stood over him. Dark Sister held at his cheek. "Thank you for the match." That's all Fry said before withdrawing his aura and stepping away, bringing the spectacle to an end. Everyone instinctively made way for him as he passed, still shaken by the overwhelming power they had just witnessed. Seeing the aftermath of what he'd done, Fry sighed with mild irritation, and just as he was about to leave, he saw Saris Moonlight standing in his path. It was almost laughable. Of all directions he could have chosen to leave from, it just so happened to be the same spot where Saris had been watching the duel. As he passed his former temple companion, Fry muttered an apology under his breath. "Sorry, I might have gone a little too far. It had been a duel after all." But Frost was still the head of a noble house. There had been no need to humiliate him. Yet Saris shook her head. "It's fine. It was necessary." She saw it from a different angle. As a vital lesson for Frost's growth. Something essential if he were to truly be worthy of leading House Moonlight in the future. With a rare smile, Saris looked ahead with newfound clarity. "Your current level is astonishing. You looked like a true warrior. Like a living legend whose history is still being written before our eyes. If you don't mind, may I have the honor of dueling you next time?" Fry was caught off guard by the sudden praise and request. The Ice Princess, the famously emotionless girl often likened to a lifeless doll, was showing a side of herself that felt fully alive. It was as if, at long last, Saris had begun allowing her true feelings to surface. And as she did, Fry found her breathtaking. His eyes then drifted downward, falling on Saris's restored arm. She wore a black military uniform bearing the sigil of House Moonlight. And despite the long sleeves, a portion of her right forearm was visible, revealing a strange, intricate tattoo. A frost-marked symbol, icy flowers etched like thorned vines crawling across her pale skin. Seeing that design, Frey's smile deepened as he walked past her. "It's an honor to witness your growth with my own eyes, Saris, but I'd prefer to stand beside you on the battlefield, destroying our enemies, rather than face you as one." Fry declined politely as he passed her. Saris nodded without complaint. "Then I'll see you on the battlefield, Fry Starlight." With that brief exchange, the two of them nodded and passed by one another. After all those years, there was no longer any bitterness between them. Both had moved past what once was, and looked forward to what could be. For the first time, fighting side by side felt like a real possibility. At least for Saris, who didn't hesitate to show Fry her back. Fry Starlight had changed. From the arrogant young lord he once was, to someone mysterious and unreadable, then the cursed champion of the Victoriad, and now, the miracle bringer. It was only natural for her perception of him to change after all that. And as these thoughts passed through her mind, they walked shoulder to shoulder, each going in a different direction. But then, at the exact moment they brushed past each other, a strange phenomenon erupted from nowhere. From Frey's shoulder, a violet spark shot out. A bizarre bolt of electricity slithered like a serpent, leaping from Fry and striking straight into Saris Moonlight's body. She froze in place the moment it touched her, her entire being trembling as the world around her flipped upside down. Felt like someone had torn her from her reality and thrown her into a completely different one. A dark one. A reality that sent shivers down her spine. She was no longer surrounded by soldiers. No longer in the camp she'd just been standing in. She now stood in a battlefield. A vision of carnage unlike anything she had ever seen. Flames raged across the land. Flames blood-red and crimson, as if even fire itself had been tainted by the amount of blood spilled. And when she turned around, she saw him, the man responsible for it all. He stood behind the chaos. A figure wearing a strange black mask, surrounded by a bizarre group of individuals. They looked like his followers. And they stared at him with devotion. A cursed gathering, led by one man who made her very soul tremble. And when she looked closely, he was familiar. That white hair, those features, there was no mistaking it. It was Fry, the same man she had just spoken to only moments ago. But what had happened? What was she seeing now? Where even was she? Saris tried to move, to react, to scream, to blink. But her body wouldn't respond. This masked Fry wasn't the man she knew. She didn't know him intimately. But even she could tell this wasn't the same person. And yet, for some reason, she couldn't look away. Then suddenly, he turned toward her. Their eyes met, and he reached his hand toward her. A hand soaked in blood. A hand that had caused all of this destruction. And yet, strangely, Saris found herself reaching back, taking that hand without hesitation. In that moment, she realized. She, too, was no longer the same person. And just like that, the world flipped again, and Saris returned to reality. As Fry passed by her, silently walking away, at that moment, she turned toward him immediately, shock etched across her face from the horror of what she had just seen. Her hand reached out, instinctively, trying to stop him, but before she could take a single step in his direction, a sharp voice echoed in her mind. "Do not move. Take one more step and you'll regret it." It was the voice of a woman, old, gentle, yet cold and commanding. Saris obeyed instantly. She didn't dare go against it. "My lady, what just happened? What did I just see? And what does it have to do with Fry?" she asked, bewildered. Silence followed, until the strange, thorn tattoos along her arm began to faintly glow. "I do not know what that was, but something foreign invaded your body just now. A force born from that young man." The voice spoke again, clearly referring to Fry. "That power, I've never seen anything like it. An aura, ominous, and deeply unnatural. Even someone of your level couldn't identify it?" Saris was stunned by what she heard. Even her lady couldn't see through Fry. "Stay away from that boy, Saris. Whatever lies inside him is not something that should be awakened." The voice was firm, final. Saris slowly nodded, unwilling to defy the command. She cast one last look toward Frey's back as he walked away. She couldn't stop thinking about the vision. About how he had looked in that twisted reality. What exactly had she seen? Saris had no answer. But the future would give her one. Chapter 497. Path of Blood 1. Fry Starlight's POV. Slowly, the morning sun rose, marking the cursed beginning of a new day. In the continent of the Ultras, it was rare for one to catch a breath of fresh air, with death and desolation having long consumed the land. But here, on the shores of the demonic sea, the air was still almost the same, causing me to inhale deeply without meaning to. A refreshing winter breeze filled my lungs to the brim. I had already distanced myself from the gathering of soldiers and was heading toward the tent that now served as my temporary home. I had spent far too long sparring with them barehanded, to the point where my muscles started to feel slightly fatigued. It wasn't anything serious. Just a dull, lingering ache from throwing punches nonstop. But still, it was annoying. If this was enough to wear me out, it only meant one thing. I still had a long way to go. Today, the army would begin its advance again, and the main assault on the continent of the Ultras would commence. In other words, The real war was about to begin. Naturally, I'd been chosen to lead the vanguard. That meant I'd be on the move today, and before that happened, I had only a few short hours to rest. Silently, I stepped into my tent. It was quiet inside, bare really, just my gear and a wooden bed I rarely used. Standing still, I spread out my aura to scan the area out of caution, but sensed nothing. Sansa didn't come today. Or perhaps she came earlier and didn't find me here. A shame, really. We didn't even get to spend the final night together before the next battle began. With only a few hours remaining, and complete solitude surrounding me, I figured this was the perfect time to sharpen my awareness. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I reached inside my garments and pulled out a certain item. Without warning, I placed the nameless mask over my face and closed my eyes, allowing it to pull me inward, into that surreal, imaginary world housed within. The reality around me twisted upside down in an instant. When I opened my eyes again, I was already standing in that bizarre library space. This place no longer felt strange to me. I'd spent enough time here during my early training. So, with steady steps, I ignored the chaos of books strewn all around the ground and headed straight to the second floor without delay. That floor wasn't much better. Unlike the early days when every book was neatly aligned, practically begging to be read, the place was now a disaster zone. And honestly, I was the reason. At some point, I'd grown tired of returning books to their place and began tossing them aside once I finished them. I did it so often that it became a habit. I never bothered organizing this damned imaginary space. So, like always, I made my way to the middle of the pile I'd last been reading and picked up the last book I touched. Path of Blood. Seated among the clutter, I resumed reading, diving deeper into the twisted training methods of that man. Nameless, the warrior who built his legacy through the burial of countless souls. In order to create the ability that shattered the very limits of the world, the power that defied the laws of life and death, he had to study every form of life this world held. He slaughtered every race imaginable and conducted sickening experiments on them, one after another, until he attained enough knowledge to understand their origin. In essence, that maddening obsession drove him to kill more than anyone else, to sow more destruction than anyone else. A monster among monsters, Nameless was the only one truly worthy of the title Death. If death itself had a king in this world, it would be him, without a doubt. In any case, even though his main goal had been to break the cycle of life and death, what Nameless accomplished had other, unintended side effects, additional results that only amplified his power further, pushing him to a level where he could challenge beings like Agarath. This was what came to be known as the Path of Blood, a unique method of training that Nameless discovered and refined over countless years on the battlefield. By walking this twisted and dark path, Nameless found a way to grow stronger with every life he took. The more he killed, the more his hands were soaked in blood, the more his power surged. In other words, he didn't just gain combat experience from each battle. He ascended to higher realms every single time he fought. A sickening method of training. One fitting only for a beast like him. And here I am, following in his footsteps, continuing down the very same path. The path that drowns you in blood, in death, in endless, savage killing. Yet, even as I say this, what I've achieved so far is nothing but a drop in the ocean compared to what Nameless accomplished. Since the start of the war, I've killed a total of 27,000 Ultras soldiers. Before that, I wiped out thousands of nightmare creatures in the Eastern Territories. But in the end, those numbers are meaningless. Tiny, insignificant, compared to the legacy Nameless left behind. I found myself laughing unconsciously as I continued reading about the Path of Blood and that nameless monster's past. I've killed so many, humans and beasts alike, and as a result, I'm starting to feel like I can't breathe anymore. I've hidden it well until now, but these stains of blood, the crimson marks that won't wash off my body, they've grown too numerous. And now, it feels like I'm sinking into this red swamp, one I might never crawl out of. I killed many, and I'm still ready to kill far more than that. all for the sake of power. The overwhelming strength I needed to achieve my goal. I was willing to go much, much further to obtain it. But somewhere along the way, I began to lose myself. My sword started craving it. Blood, death. My body, my soul, my very existence became incomplete unless I was on the battlefield. That bloody smile. It would form on my face without me even realizing, whenever I was about to slaughter my enemies. Today, I'm returning to the battlefield. That thought alone made my body tremble. Not from fear, but anticipation. I've become someone who craves the battlefield, someone who welcomes war. I'm slowly losing myself. It's only been 8 months, and already I've reached this state. I reached it after killing what now feels like a mere handful of people. And because of that, I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly are you, Nameless? How did he kill so many souls? Innocent or guilty, it didn't matter. How did he stay sane all those years, drenched in death and bloodshed? Was it because you felt nothing? Were you always that heartless monster from the beginning? Gazing upward, toward the library's upper floors, I asked, "Answer me, Nameless." Chapter 498, Path of Blood, 2. My voice echoed across this cosmic library. But as expected, no answer came. So, with a long sigh, I returned to reading the book in my hands. The path of blood demands countless sacrifices. I need to kill more, and more enemies. I need to spill their blood until it forms rivers. Only then will my body evolve on its own and ascend to new heights, far faster than any normal method could ever offer. Nameless once used that very method to push himself to the peak of the SSS rank. It's astounding how he surpassed every stage of that rank this way. There are 7 stages within the SSS rank, listed as follows. 1. Throne beyond existence. The first and hardest stage. Is considered the ceiling most can never break through. 2. Pulse of chaos. The stage where raw power begins spiraling out of control, far beyond one's limits. Reaching this stage often results in gaining entirely new abilities. Abilities that transcend human comprehension. 3. Origin revelation. A mysterious stage where one reaches the full potential of their race. It's an anomalous phase. One that varies from species to species. Because each race holds unique traits, it's impossible to predict what kind of power a person might awaken upon reaching this level. 4. Aura boil. A stage that affects one's aura specifically. To put it simply, SSS-ranked warriors wield an aura fundamentally different from all other beings. Their aura is exponentially more powerful than the norm. It erupts with volatile, boiling force. The way it functions is akin to the concept of literal boiling, making every attack they unleash feel like something from another world entirely. As I read these details, most of which were still new to me, I began to understand just how far away I truly was from the power I sought. I hadn't even reached the bare minimum required to attempt stepping onto this path. And the biggest issue? The books I'd read so far only detailed the first 4 stages. As for the 5th, 6th, and 7th, I knew nothing beyond the names I'd once scribbled onto a piece of paper, back when I was still just an author. An author who lived his life inside a fantasy. I really believed I was the one who created this world. But the deeper I dove into these books, into the long history of this world, the more I realized I was nothing but a single piece within this vast universe. All that prior knowledge I had, the story I once wrote, they were nothing more than coincidences, easily explainable in a dozen different ways. I wouldn't even be surprised if the engineer had a hand in it all. To be honest, that sounded like the most logical scenario to me. But then, when I think like that, I can't help but remember what Agaroth, the Demon King, once said to me during our very first meeting. My creator, the one who made me, that's what he said. The great Demon King claimed that I was the one who made him. His words completely contradict everything I've been trying to convince myself of. Was Agaroth lying? Was he just trying to manipulate me? For some reason, I didn't feel like he was the type to say such things lightly. He didn't strike me as someone who would lie just for the sake of it. Closing the book in my hands, I laid back on the library's white floor and stared up at the countless floors above. Which one is true? I wonder. Closing my eyes, I sank deeper and deeper into the void of my consciousness. I still know so little about myself and about this world I now live in. Am I merely a vessel for some cosmic being far greater than I can comprehend? Or am I something else entirely? What is it that the engineer truly wants from me? And what did Agaroth desire? I had no answer to any of these questions. So I rose once more, preparing to leave this imaginary space. There's nothing I can do but keep moving forward. I won't lose. I won't fall again. I made that vow to myself long ago. The next time I'm defeated will be the day I die. And that's a fate I cannot allow. So I'll keep moving forward, no matter how much I change, no matter how drenched these hands become in blood. I will never stop. Not until I kill all of my enemies. The long-awaited day had finally come. The day the Empire would launch its first campaign on the continent of the Ultras. The atmosphere was thunderous. Morale had reached its peak as an army of 70,000 soldiers prepared to march. To lead such a force, the Empire had entrusted several seasoned veterans with command. Foremost among them was the current Lord of House Sunlight, the old warrior, Iris Sunlight. Both Ser Alon and Aegon Valyrian had granted him full authority over the army, placing their faith in his decades of experience. By his side stood his brother, Galvarion, as well as Raphael Bloodmater, commander of the vanguard, and the Grand Warden himself, Oliver Kahn, who had joined the war effort personally. These four were the direct commanders of the army. Each of them led a designated number of elite warriors under their command. Among them, Bloodmater retained command over the Special Vanguard forces, the very first to engage the enemy. Those forces were divided into squads, each assigned to powerful warriors who were granted the title of general in this war. Among them stood Phoenix Sunlight. But what drew the most attention were the two squads placed under the command of young men who hadn't even reached the age of 20. One squad was led by Snow Lionheart, and among his ranks marched the Saintess Urasha herself. The other followed the modern miracle, Fry Starlight. It was he who requested to be the very first to face the enemy head-on. Was it courage? Or was the dark star of House Starlight simply insane? Fry Starlight's squad consisted of 1,000 soldiers, including 8 elite warriors from the previous vanguard who had chosen to follow him. Most notably, Sansa Valyrian and Ghost Umbra had joined him of their own free will, and so had someone else. As Fry donned his armor, a figure approached him in the ceremonial robes of a battle priestess, her radiant blonde hair glowing more brilliantly than ever. It was Uriel. Chapter 499. Path of Blood 3. Fry greeted her with a smile. Uriel, I didn't expect you to join me. Shouldn't the Saintess be chasing after the prophesied hero? He asked. Uriel nodded. You're not wrong. The Saintess does follow the hero, and that's exactly what Urasha is doing. There's no need for 2 Saintesses, so I chose this side instead. I see, Fry nodded, walking alongside her toward the army's front lines. Your presence will be a great support for the troops. Just stay behind me and try to keep up. His words made Uriel blink, surprised by his strange demeanor. Fry, am I imagining it? Or are you actually excited? That eerie grin carved across Frey's face didn't seem natural, and he himself appeared unaware of it. Trying to adjust his expression, he offered a soft apology. Sorry, that was unseemly of me. Uriel quickly waved her hands. Not at all. No need to apologize. It's only natural for warriors to fight for those they love. She tried to justify his behavior with kindness, but Fry chuckled bitterly. You're right. Still, I didn't want to show you that side of me. You've been avoiding me lately because of it, haven't you? His words made her face twist in visible surprise, before transforming into something else. a quiet confusion. Was I the only one who saw it? Uriel had genuinely believed that Fry shared the same strange vision. She'd been waiting for the right moment to talk to him about it. It had taken her time to overcome the fear that gripped her heart. After all, she'd seen herself die by his hand. But it seemed he hadn't even realized it, which made her question what kind of power it truly was. Still, there was no time to dwell on that now. Clearing this misunderstanding was her priority. "That's not why I was avoiding you," she said. Fry raised an eyebrow. He truly believed Uriel had grown to hate his bloodlust. "If that's not the reason, then why?" he asked, genuinely curious. But Uriel shook her head. "I can't talk about it here. If you're willing, after our next battle, please give me a little of your time. I'll tell you everything then." Uriel had already made up her mind to tell him everything. She saw no point in keeping it to herself anymore. But she couldn't bring it up here, not in the midst of the army. They were about to march into enemy territory, and Fry was their commander. She couldn't pull him aside. All they could do was wait. "After the battle, then." Frey's smile deepened. "Then we both have to survive. Is this your way of asking me to protect you, Uriel?" Fry misunderstood again, which made Uriel part her lips, trying to clarify, but he suddenly burst out laughing, cutting her off. "No need to make that face, I'm only teasing. Besides, I was planning to do that anyway. There was no need for her to ask. He simply wouldn't let her die." Fry was direct like that, and Uriel found herself at a loss for words. In moments like this, he felt like the older one. Not the other way around. The saint candidate lowered her head, seemingly lost in her own thoughts, eyes drifting to the shadows spreading beneath her feet. That darkness reminded her of something. "Will that demon girl be joining us?" Fry turned to her, following her gaze to the shadows below. "You mean Sansa?" "Yes. She's with us as we speak." It wasn't easy to sense Sansa's presence, but Fry had no trouble with it. Seeing Uriel's grim expression, Fry sighed, well aware of her deep hatred for demons. "Sansa is an ally, and someone dear to me. Uriel, I want you to trust her." It was a rare request coming from Fry, but Uriel gave no reply, and he didn't push her. He already knew her past. Still, he wanted to plant the seed. Perhaps one day, Uriel could come to accept the demon who walked among them. Fry and Uriel couldn't talk much longer. The noise of marching soldiers, the thunder of war drums, and the trembling earth beneath them drowned out everything else. As iris sunlight ignited the air with a rousing speech, the troops roared in unison, ready to launch the first assault of this war. Unfortunately, Fry paid the old man's speech little attention and missed it entirely. His focus was drawn entirely to what stood ahead of him. As he looked toward what was coming, Fry was caught off guard by the approach of a large figure from the right flank. A towering man, scarred and rugged, with reddish-brown hair tucked beneath a dented helmet. A massive greatsword was strapped to his back, and his merciless eyes gleamed with something unsettling. "You!" Fry recognized him immediately, one of the 8 who had chosen to follow Fry to the bitter end. "So you still remember me? I'm honored, Lord Starlight." With a grim, gravelly voice that made many avoid him instinctively, the man introduced himself. "My name is Morval Knox, a lone mercenary who spent his life wandering through war zones." A twisted smile curled across Morval's face, one eerily similar to Frey's own. "Morval, huh? That's quite the bloodlust radiating from your body." Hearing that, Morval let out a loud, guttural laugh. "Isn't it obvious, Lord Starlight? That's precisely why I chose to follow you." "Oh? And how so?" Fry asked, though he already had a feeling. "I won't lie to you, Lord Starlight. I'm here to kill. I want to tear and spill the blood of as many people as I can. I've spent my whole life drifting from battlefield to battlefield for that reason alone." Morval looked exhilarated. It was clear he wasn't a normal human being. He was wrong in a way that made him love the act of carving through flesh. "By your side, Lord Starlight, I feel I'll finally be able to satisfy that hunger. The hunger for slaughter. Morval laughed again, so loudly and violently that the soldiers around him instinctively stepped farther away. He was already infamous, not a warrior who fought for kin or country, but a mad butcher who found his purpose in carnage and ruin. There, and only there, could he be his true self. One could argue he was more wicked than the ultras themselves. He had a dark history. Fry knew all this. And yet, he showed no disapproval. In fact, he welcomed it. Excellent, Morval Knox. Then prepare to stain your hands in blood, because we won't be sparing anyone. With that, he moved to the front lines and surged forward. Moments later, the first assault force scorched its way into enemy soil. Under his lead and no one else's, the scouts and assassins had already returned, and Fry now knew the position of many of his enemies. And he had made up his mind. He would kill them all. To the very last one. Chapter 500. Intervention of Faith. The world was undergoing many upheavals. Soon, kings would clash, and all cards would be revealed. The war that pitted humans against humans had, ironically, drawn the attention of all powers. And now, at this very moment, it had become impossible to predict what might happen in this war that had yet to truly begin. The War of Darkness. The Holy Island, Sicily, a paradise for the Church's followers, blinded by their faith for far too long. It truly was a heaven on earth, a miracle where a waterfall descended straight from the sky, nourishing its land and people with divine grace. Since the return of Saralon and his surprise assault on the central cathedral, the Church's activity had diminished drastically, to the point where it now seemed entirely subordinate to the Empire. The capture of both High Bishop Michael Platini and Ramiel Calestis inside Beatrice's prison cube had only worsened the situation. Church followers were everywhere. In noble houses, in major guilds. It was an entity with roots so deeply embedded that it had long been considered the cornerstone of the Empire's very foundation. Their complete submission to the returned emperor from beyond the grave Sarah alone was something few had foreseen. And now, with the War of Shadows begun, the Church had dispatched its most powerful asset, Saint Eurasia, marching to battle alongside their chosen hero. One could say the faction loyal to the Lord of Light had shown their true allegiance to the empire they belonged to, especially against their one sworn enemy, the Ultras. The Church's desire to annihilate the filthy demon worshippers surpassed all else. Cleansing the world of their schemes had become their holy mission. That much was undeniably true, but were the Ultras truly the only enemy? The truth ran far deeper than most imagined. On the sacred grounds of Sicily, a group of men carved their way across the Holy Land, heading toward a place that few had ever dared to approach. Led by the 3 high bishops, they moved swiftly, accompanied by a select unit of elite ranks from within the Church. Their destination was the base of that magnificent waterfall descending from the sky. At the head of the group walked High Bishop Bladder, the aged man who had guided the Church for decades. "Any news from the war?" he asked, his face void of emotion. The man to his right responded. It was Ramiel K.M. Calestis, the youngest and only black-haired high bishop among the 3. According to the reports, the first clash occurred today. Although the main armies have yet to mobilize, the vanguard fought a difficult battle. One could say the current situation favors the Empire. Hearing this, Bladder gave a silent nod. The hero is among the vanguard. There's no room for defeat. The Lord of Light would never allow his chosen to die on this earth. Besides that, Saint Eurasia was with him, and in this world very few could hope to kill her. We've sent many forces alongside the hero and the saint. Things remain stable for now, and the royal family hasn't requested further reinforcements. But the likelihood of them summoning us personally in the future is high. This time it was the man on the left who spoke. High Bishop Michael Platini, also known as the Church's executioner. His harsh expression and severe gaze had long made him the least liked among the bishops. Staring at Bladder, he brought up a critical point. The royal family believes they have us under control. And that's fine. This situation works in our favor. As he said this, Bladder came to a halt, having finally reached their destination, the base of the miraculous waterfall that split the skies. The Iron Emperor is extremely dangerous. I never expected him to attack us alone upon his return. That old man places absolute faith in his strength. Ser alone was but a single man, yet his power and experience were vast. Enough that even Platter hadn't dared to oppose him openly. But even he failed to discover this place, despite standing so very close. With a sinister smile that didn't match his noble aura, Bladder and his team advanced toward the waterfall. As they stepped forward with unwavering confidence, their bodies glowed with the brilliance of holy aura. Light so bright it illuminated the path ahead. Then, without warning, something inexplicable occurred. Bladder and those with him had entered the waterfall from one side, but they never emerged from the other. It was as if the waterfall had swallowed them whole. Yet the truth was far more bizarre. The land their feet touched was still, undeniably, part of Holy Sicily. And yet, at the same time, it was not. Beyond the waterfall, the island's terrain remained the same. But the atmosphere was completely different. The sky in that place was pitch black, adorned with stars that shone like lanterns overhead. Even though, moments ago, it had been bright daylight on the other side, this hidden realm was blessed in ways the outer world was not. The greenery and nature asserted their dominance in breathtaking beauty. The earth itself pulsed with aura, and the very air they breathed made everyone who set foot there feel as if they had been reborn. On this forsaken side of the world, there wasn't much to speak of, only lush greenery and a few scattered structures, temples erected in honor of the so-called gods worshipped by the church's devout. Before Bladder and his entourage, another group appeared, every one of them clad in pure white from head to toe, elderly men, women, and old priests, their eyes brimming with unwavering faith. All of them bowed respectfully before Platter and his companions. "We welcome the High Bishop to the land of eternal night, Nocthera, the sealed land that only a chosen few had ever been allowed to enter, the secret the church had hidden for centuries." Bladder gave a nod as his deep eyes examined the sacred grounds. "Is the angel ready?" He asked the question that truly mattered, the reason he had taken the risk of entering this place. The old man standing at the front of the welcoming crowd smiled deeply, eyes still shut, and nodded. "Give the order, Bladder, and our greatest weapon will march at your command." "Excellent," Platter replied as he ventured deeper into the land of eternal night alongside those white-robed strangers. "The war of darkness has begun. The Ultras and the Empire will destroy each other. In a war of this magnitude, both sides would reveal their full arsenal. No one would hold back their trump cards. They would clash with everything they had, and though there would surely be a victor, that was of little concern. The Starlight family has sent its most elite forces to the front lines, with that monster Fry Starlight at their helm. The Imperial family is conserving its strength for the masters of the Ultras. Sooner or later, both will suffer devastating losses." As all eyes turned toward the continent of the Ultras, and the war reached its boiling point, no one could imagine what was quietly unfolding on the other side of the world. "The time has come,"